Chapter 1436. Tian Ke, the top disciple of Xintian Peak, was a great emperor. His cultivation was below Xintian Peak's, and even the elders couldn't compete with him. Among the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace, Tian Ke's strength was definitely at the top. The mystic heaven deity Lord rarely showed herself, and she was the most mysterious of the 7 peak masters. Not to mention the disciples, even the peak masters rarely saw her in person. All matters of the mystic heaven hall were basically decided by Tian Ke, and he even taught the disciples and taught them the art of forging. To the disciples of the peaks, Tian Ke wasn't just the eldest senior brother in name, but also half a master. Everyone in Xintian Peak respected him. However, Qin Hao trespassed on Xintian Peak and violated the rules of the Divine Palace. Tian Ke didn't punish Qin Hao, but punished Xianyuan Di and the others. At this moment, all the new disciples were stunned, and Xiaogua and Gu Kuei were also in disbelief. Why? Eldest senior brother? Xianyuan Di asked. Even though he was angry, he didn't dare to refute and only wanted an explanation. The purple rocks of Xintian Peak were extremely tough, and even emperors would have a hard time mining them, let alone refining them. A purple rock the size of a millstone could only be extracted a few ounces after being refined thousands of times. Tian Ke wanted each of them to refine 50 kilograms before sunset. This was to force them to their deaths. It was obviously an impossible task. Moreover, the Emperor Realm Qi building pills for the 5 of them were deducted, which was a huge loss. The rules were set by Palace Lord Migres himself. His disciple made a mistake, and eldest senior brother punished us instead. Is he afraid of Migres, perfected lord? From his point of view, aren't the disciples of Xintian Peak inferior? It's too unfair that the Divine Palace allows Migres Palace to do whatever they want. If Xintian Peak is bullied everywhere, what's the point of its dignity and existence in the long run? The Xianyuan family members said seriously. These words came from the bottom of their hearts, but there was no lack of provocation. Tian Ke couldn't help but find it funny. He raised his arm and pointed at the other 6 peaks in the clouds. Tell me, where does this world belong to? Of course, the Divine Palace. Xianyuan Di replied. Who is in charge of the Divine Palace? Tian Ke asked again. True Monarch Migres of Migres Hall. Everyone responded in unison. This was the obvious truth. The entire Divine Palace is managed by Uncle Migres. He is the master of the Divine Palace. Everything is decided by him. As mere disciples, don't you think it's childish to talk about fairness with the palace master? Tian Ke wondered if his new junior brother in front of him had a screw loose in his head. The Divine Palace preaches, and the geniuses of the continent came of their own accord. No one forced you. All the cultivation resources of the sect were provided to you free of charge. The elders who guided you were also willing to sacrifice themselves for you. The financial, material, and manpower of the sect were all used on you, and you still have objections? Tian Ke let out a roar. Disciple knows his mistake. Cold sweat dripped down the faces of Xianyuan Di and the other 4. Only now did they realize that they had misspoken, not to mention the Divine Palace. What right did the insignificant disciples of the clans, or sect masters of the outside world, have to question the clan master and the sect master? If they were in the Southern Proud Empire, their actions would be nothing more than haggling with Xianyuan Gaoyan. Considering that your journey has not been easy, that you have just entered the sect, and that you are rational, impulsive, and speak without thinking, I will deduct a month's worth of Emperor Realm Qi building pills. This is considered a light punishment. Tian Ke sneered. Fortunately, his senior brother was not the eastern sky of the Migres Palace. If he had handled things according to the temper of the eastern sky, as the direct disciple of the Migres Palace Master, Qin Hao can listen to any of the peaks. His treatment is no different from that of the disciples of the Peak Masters. This is also the rule of the Divine Palace. If you still question the fairness, then leave the Divine Palace. This place is not suitable for you to cultivate. You can go to the outside world to ask for fairness. Tian Ke waved his hand, and said coldly. His words were extremely heavy. When these words came out, the disciples of the Shantian Peak were all shocked. Then, it attracted a wave of envy and jealousy. The 7 peaks of the Divine Palace did not preach to each other, but the people of the Migres Palace could freely wander between the 7 peaks without being bound by the rules of the Divine Palace. Moreover, the other peak masters treated Qin Hao as if he was their own direct disciple. They taught him everything they knew and could not hide anything from him. What a superior condition this was. So this is the real treatment of the palace lord's disciple. Siowa looked at Qin Hao. They were both direct disciples of the peak masters, but why was the difference in status so great that even he was jealous? Senior brother Tian K, I came here today to learn the way of forging, Qin Hao said with a wronged face. If it wasn't for old man Migres, did he really think he would have come willingly? He didn't come to learn forging, but simply to see the Shantian deity lord. Let's go mining. Xianyuan Di turned around sullenly. Even though he was not convinced, he had to. If he continued to ask for fairness from a Migres palace, he would be expelled from the sect. He hated the heavens and hated the earth. He hated that true Lord Migres had not taken him as his disciple. But Qin Hao. Wait, make yourself clear before you leave. Qin Hao scolded. Xianyuan Di heard this and turned around subconsciously. Qin Hao was not going to let him go. What do you want to say? The youth holding the forging hammer said coldly. When I killed Xianyuan Feng and Xianyuan Jie in the past, they had only themselves to blame. I just have something to tell you. You should settle your grudges in the outside world. You better behave in the Divine Palace. Qin Hao warned with a sharp gaze. Senior brother Qin Hao is right. Xianyuan Di flicked his sleeves and left with his people. Qin Hao had already told him with his eyes that if he didn't stop now, he would take his life without leaving the Divine Palace. As the disciple of the Divine Palace Master, Qin Hao had a lot of weight. Xianyuan Di knew that he would always be the one at a disadvantage if he fought with him openly. But today, he was indeed miserable. Senior brother Tian K, these people have a grudge against me and must be deliberately trying to stir up trouble. In the future, at Shantian Peak, I hope Senior Brother can control them more and persuade them to let go of their grudges and focus on cultivation. Qin Hao cupped his hands at Tian K and sighed silently, as if he had already given up on his grudge. You're right, Junior Brother. I will counsel them often and let them mine, or is to train their minds. Tian K smiled. In the distance, Xianyuan Di and the others felt suffocated. Blood almost surged up from their throats as they helped each other to a mine. Miserable. Gu Kuei shook his head. This should be a warning. All right, you guys continue to practice forging. How to control the temperature of the fire, how to effectively extract the ores, and how to temper the equipment. I've explained all of these clearly before. Today's mission is to forge a low-grade venerable artifact each. As Tian K's voice rang out, the 100 or so disciples in the training hall got busy again. The clanking sounds of forging continued, and they instantly forgot about Qin Hao's existence. After all, if they didn't meet the standard, their cultivation would be affected by the deduction of Emperor Realm Qi building pills. Junior brother Qin Hao, since we're at Shantian Peak, you should also join the forging team. Tian K said. Okay. Qin Hao nodded. He rolled up his sleeves and followed Siowa to the furnace, followed by Tian Quebec. By the way, Senior brother Tian K, why isn't Uncle Master Shantian in the training hall? Qin Hao asked. The personal disciples of the Peak Masters naturally had a special relationship. They had to address their elders according to their seniority. The second-class and third-class disciples didn't dare to do so. If ordinary disciples saw a Shantian immortal lord, they had to address him as Peak Masters. If they saw perfected Lord Tian Quan, they had to respectfully address him as Palace Lord. It seemed that Qin Hao and Tian K were incomparably close. That's right, Senior Brother. I didn't see Master either, Siowa said. After entering the peak yesterday, Tian K was the one who received him. Master, you're very busy. Tian K shook his head helplessly. He hadn't seen Shantian in person for a long time. He looked at Qin Hao and said, Junior Brother, I'll be teaching you in Shantian Peak in the future. Do you mind? That's exactly what I want. How would I mind? Qin Hao smiled. Tian K's cultivation was high. He was in the same batch as Eastern Sky, and they were both first seats. They were considered to be on par with each other. It was a good deal for Qin Hao to be taught the art of forging by a 9-star weapon emperor. After all, he was only a lower-level weapon emperor in his previous life. However, Qin Hao didn't mind who taught him. He wanted to meet Xiantian Immortal Lord and find out the truth behind Empress Xuantian's death in the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. However, it seemed that it would be difficult to meet the owner of Shantian Peak in a short time. Sayogwa came to the furnace and continued to smash the ores. Tian K took out a piece of purple metal the size of a stone block from his spatial ring and placed it on the forging table. He said to Qin Hao, "Junior brother, try it." After that, he handed Qin Hao a sword mold. He wanted him to hammer the stone block into a sword. Okay. Qin Hao grabbed a forging hammer from the rack and raised it above his head. A crescent-shaped shadow of the hammer whizzed through the air and hit the metal block with a bang. "Junior brother, you have amazing wrist strength." Tian K couldn't help but be surprised. He knew how heavy Shantian Peak's forging hammer was. An ordinary disciple could only swing it with 2 hands. However, Qin Hao could easily lift it with 1 hand, and the power he carried when he smashed it down was definitely not something an ordinary primitive emperor could do. Sayogwa, who was recognized by a Xiantian Immortal Lord as his personal disciple, would have to use all of his physical strength without using his origin spirit. However, Qin Hao swung it so easily. However, Qin Hao's experience was also very uncomfortable. When the hammer fell, a strong shock wave rushed towards him. He almost lost his grip on the hammer. So hard. Below the forging hammer, there was only a dent on the purple metal. This wasn't what Qin Hao had imagined. According to his estimation, it should have been flattened by the hammer. Although he didn't use his soul power, that strike contained the power of the indestructible samsara art. This was not ordinary. Purple rock iron, big brother. This thing was refined from Shantian Peak's purple rock, is incomparably hard. Moreover, it was personally forged into a metal block by senior brother Tian Quebec. Its density is ridiculously high. You actually made a dent with a casual strike. Sayogwa was shocked, as expected of his lifelong idol. This is to let Xianyuan Di and the rest mine the purple rock, Qin Hao looked at Tian Quebec. He was already mourning for the Xianyuan clan. Yes, Tian K nodded. The purple rock ore's density can be used to forge an emperor artifact. The ore under your feet is the ore I refined. As for what Xianyuan Di and the rest mined, it is just an ordinary ore. Tian K looked at Qin Hao with admiration. This wrist strength was enough to become a king refiner. It would be a pity if he didn't enter Shantian Peak. No wonder he was chosen by senior uncle Tian Quan. That can be used to forge an emperor artifact. Qin Hao's eyes were filled with passion. As a great emperor in his previous life, he could naturally measure the power of the purple rock, however, to stop him? Impossible. Spitting on his palm, Qin Hao held the forging hammer with both hands. A golden light bloomed, and dense scales quickly covered his arms. His body grew by 1 meter. Qin Hao, activate the dragon's soul power. Chapter 1437. Qin Hao's body looked like it was brimming with violence. He picked up the hammer and swung it again. Boom! His draconic energy flowed into the hammer, causing it to glow with a golden brilliance that seemed capable of shattering mountains. A powerful force fell from the sky and smashed into the purple stone concentrate, causing the forging table to shake. What domineering strength! Tian K praised. Qin Hao's body was no weaker than a 5th-level Emperor Realm cultivator after being strengthened by his soul power. The purple stone concentrate had caved in even more than before. Tian K could also see that this was far from the limit of Qin Hao's soul power. Clang, 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 clang. The sound of hammering continued on the casting table as a series of sparks flashed. Shadows of hammers danced in the air as Qin Hao swung them like a torrential torrent. A whirlwind appeared on the ground, and Qin Hao, who was in the eye of the whirlwind, was like a ferocious beast. He didn't stop to catch his breath. Every strike didn't diminish in strength. On the contrary, his strength continued to increase. His violent and tireless attitude caused Tian Kei's heart to tremble as he watched from the side. Shantian Peak had never had a disciple like Qin Hao. This wasn't forging, it was fighting and killing. In comparison, the other disciples of the training hall were like a group of young ladies who had just come out of their boudoir. Their movements were as gentle as sheep. However, Tian Kei only admired Qin Hao's talent. He didn't approve of such fanatical methods, even though Qin Hao looked very passionate. Thump! The final hammer was hammered down. Qin Hao stopped and looked at the large purple sword lying on the forging table with a satisfied smile. The sword was thick and rough. It didn't have a sharp edge, and traces of purple stone could be seen on the blade. It looked like countless patches were stacked together, making for an ugly appearance. Even so, a low-rank emperor weapon might not be as sturdy as it. What do you think? Qin Hao looked at Tian Kei confidently. Although the craftsmanship was a little rough, it was still a sword mold after all. As long as it went through the later stages of reforging, refining, and sharpening, the sword would undergo a tremendous change. When the time came, the sword would be unsheathed and its sharpness would reach 10,000 meters. Big brother, you're too amazing. Sayogwa clasped his hands in worship. The reverence in his heart began to overflow like a surging river. Tian Kei only smiled and did not answer. Next, he took out a purple rock metal block that was about the same size as the one that Qin Hao had forged. Then, he aimed his palm at the tool rack, and a casting hammer fell into his palm. At this instant, the expression of the first seat of the Shantian Peak turned extremely solemn. Tian Kei quietly stared at the violet or on the platform. His gaze seemed to be immersed in the ore. He held the hammer in his hand, and although there wasn't a trace of energy circulating around him, in the eyes of Qin Hao, Tian Kei's figure was incomparably majestic, as though he was a god that had descended to the mortal world, possessing the power to split open the heavens and cast the earth. He was so tall that it was difficult to look at him. Drink! Tian Kei moved. He lowered his waist and dismounted from his horse. His 2 feet stepped on the ground, and his body seemed to be connected to the earth. Earth chi turned into blood and surged. He still didn't use any vital chi or soul power. He raised his arm, and the hammer shadow fell. It was an ordinary and simple movement. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. It wasn't loud, but the violet or that Qin Hao had hammered thousands of times was flattened by Tian Kei's hammer. It lay flat on the platform like a flat cake. So strong. The shadow of a hammer flashed in front of Qin Hao's eyes. It was as if his soul had been shattered along with it. Without using vital chi or soul power, Tian Kei simply waved his hand and surpassed Qin Hao, who was one of the strongest emperors in the Emperor realm. This was the terror of a great emperor. Settle the mind, enter the tool, and use the soul as the hammer to break all things. With that thought in mind, Tian Kei smashed down again. An incomparably strong power spread out, and on the forging table, the destructive power formed a ripple that swept out, transforming into a swirling current of air. The purple rock essence that was spread out was pulled towards the center, tightly gathering together. This was the second hammer strike. Forging weapons is based on strength, but the creation of weapons is not the product of strength. Only where the heart desires with a weapon have soul. Only then can it be worthy of being a cultivator's divine soldier. Bang! The third hammer strike. The strike slashed out like a knife. The hammer in Tian Kei's hand rubbed against the violet rock sword, causing a layer of lightning to appear between the two and emit a sharp sound. The way of the physical body, the third level of the great emperor realm. Qin Hao was shocked. Tian Kei's cultivation level was comparable to his in his previous life. However, he was only the chief disciple under one peak. The Divine Palace's foundation was terrifying. At this time, after the lightning flashed, a second violet sword appeared on the platform. Its length, width, and thickness were exactly the same as the one that Qin Hao had forged. This meant that without any further tempering and polishing, the density at which the two swords were hammered by external forces was the same. However, the former had been hammered by Qin Hao 1,000 times. The latter had only been hammered 3 times. Junior brother Qi catch. Tian Ke waved his hand, and the violet sword he'd forged on the platform fell into Tsiogua's hand. Tian Ke smiled at Qin Hao and said, "Junior brother Qin, pick up your sword." "Okay." Qin Hao nodded. He threw away the hammer and bent down to pick up the other violet sword. He got into a fighting stance and looked at Tsiogua. "Junior brother, come." They were both sword molds. They hadn't been polished, sharpened, or refined. Although Tian Ke was a king refiner, the hammering force he used to forge the sword was equal to Qin Hao's. The density of the two swords was the same. Tian Ke let him touch it. Qin Hao wasn't afraid. "I'm coming." Tsiogua picked up the sword with both hands and dragged it on the ground. With a swish, sparks flew. When he got close, he raised the sword and slashed down. Qin Hao responded with the same attack. At this moment, neither of them activated their yuan qi or soul power. After all, the strength of one's yuan qi would affect the quality of the weapon to a certain extent. Clang! The two heavy swords crossed each other. To his surprise, Qin Hao's sword was broken by Tsiogua. With a clang, the other part of the sword fell to the bottom of his feet. However, Tsiogua's sword didn't even have a dent. Although it was blunt, it was extremely sharp. How can this be? Qin Hao was stunned. The two swords were hammered at different times, but the force they endured was the same. Why was it that his masterpiece, which had been hammered thousands of times, could not withstand a single blow and was broken by the work of the 3 hammers of Tian Ke? "You don't understand?" Tian Ke turned around and smiled. "Junior brother Qin, before you entered the divine palace, did you have a sword with you?" "Yes," Qin Hao replied. At this moment, he became more serious. "Take it out and try," Tian Ke said. Qin Hao nodded and grasped the void. The emerald light shone under his palm. The outer flame of the emerald light shone with a layer of blood. It was the great void sword. Good sword. Tian Ke could tell at a glance whether it was a masterpiece or not. He pointed at Tsiogua and said, "Junior brother Qi, do it." "Big brother, be careful." Tsiogua shouted and waved the edgeless heavy sword again. The same move was blunt, but it turned into sharp sword light in midair. Qin Hao's eyes turned cold. With the great void sword in his hand, his aura changed obviously. It wasn't intentional, but every time he held the great void sword, it meant that a fierce battle was about to break out. Then, a ray of emerald light slashed down from his hand. Crack! The emerald light spread over the edgeless heavy sword. The purple heavy sword was cut in half. The cut was very smooth. It could be seen how sharp the great void sword was. "You scare me to death." Tsiogua held the broken sword and took 2 steps back. He knew that Qin Hao wouldn't hurt him, but Qin Hao's cold aura was still very scary. "Your sword can be called a superb item. It should have the ability to evolve, but it's still at the peak of the venerable weapon. It hasn't evolved into an imperial weapon." Tian Ke's eyes were sharp. He smiled and pointed at the broken sword in Tsiogwa's hand. "But your venerable weapon can break an imperial weapon sword model. Do you understand now?" "Soul." Qin Hao waved his hand and put the great void sword into his spatial ring. He did understand. The purple rock sword he made before was broken because it didn't have a soul. Tian Ke had only used 3 hammers, but these 3 hammers were infused with his will and soul. It was the same for the great void sword. When Qin Hao refined the second form of the great void tripod, it took him 3 days and 3 nights. He was exhausted and almost fainted. His will was integrated into the sword. He used the red lotus fire to sharpen it and used his heart. "Thank you for your guidance, Senior Brother Tian Quebec." Qin Hao bowed sincerely. Although he wasn't here to forge weapons, Senior Brother Tian Ke made him understand that forging weapons also had a soul. No matter what kind of weapon was forged, one had to use his heart. This was the same principle as alchemy. In his previous life, Qin Hao was able to reach the level of Dendi because his alchemy had a heart and a soul. There are 3,000 great paths, and each path has its limit. Why are there so few people who can reach the limit? Sword Emperor, Refiner Emperor, Dindi, Emperor Realm. It's not as simple as one realm. Let's forge another sword. Forge a sword with a soul. If not, I won't let you leave Xintian Peak today. Tian Ke smiled and walked away. As he walked, he muttered, "Focus, enter the weapon. The soul is the hammer that can break all things. Power is the foundation. Where the heart is, the soldier is invincible." Qin Hao listened carefully and bowed deeply to Tian Ke's back. Today, he had indeed learned something. Big brother, what does senior brother Tian Ke mean? Can you only create a divine soldier with your heart? Xiaogua scratched his head and asked, "Forge an emperor weapon with a soul. When you forge it, I'll tell you the real answer." Qin Hao rubbed his throat and lowered his voice. He imitated Tian Ke's tone. "Tch." Xiaogua waved his sleeve and continued forging. He only needed to forge a venerable weapon. First, he needed to protect the Emperor Realm Qi laying pill. Qin Hao chuckled and watched Tian Ke's figure disappear into the profound Heaven Palace. Was the first seed of Xintian Peak really just teaching him how to forge weapons? Not really. What was hidden in Tian Ke's words was the Emperor's path. As the sun set, Qin Hao was stuck in the high temperature of the mysterious Heaven Peak. Even though he had a fire spirit, Qin Hao was still drenched in sweat. Fortunately, he managed to complete a work that satisfied Tian Ke and was released from mysterious Heaven Peak. Although I didn't see the Lord of Xintian Peak in person, I learned some things. After returning to Migres Peak, Qin Hao fetched water and took a bath in the pavilion. Then he slightly adjusted his breathing and meditated to eliminate the fatigue of the day. He didn't care about the people the Xianyuan family left in the Divine Palace. He didn't even pay attention to them. However, Tian Ke, who he saw today, attracted Qin Hao's attention. The Lord of Xintian Peak was busy forging weapons. It was said that she hadn't shown her face for 100 years. All matters were decided by the head disciple, Tian Quebec. Even the teaching of weapon forging was handled by Tian Quebec vaguely. Was this a hint? I hope it's not what I imagined. Qin Hao lay on the bed. He remembered clearly that on the first day, he entered the Divine Palace. The voice that came from Xintian Peak was female. It wasn't Tian Ke's thick voice. At the very least, it proved that the Lord of Xintian Peak was still alive. Of course, he didn't reject being imprisoned and being forced to shout those words. Chapter 1438. Chanchan Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The path to Emperor. The cause of Empress Xuantian's death in the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm was still unknown. In the Divine Palace, the current Xintian Peak Lord was showing signs of disappearing. What secrets did the Xintian Peak Lord have? During the period when the new disciples are learning, the Peak Lord will personally come to the training hall to teach. The Xintian Deity Lord is no exception. She has to appear at least once. Qin Hao thought for a while. There were still 6 days. In these 6 days, as long as he saw the Xintian Peak Lord in person, everything would be much clearer. After learning forging techniques for a day, Qin Hao took a bath and felt comfortable all over. Soon, he fell asleep. The next day, wearing the Mantis Hall uniform, Qin Hao left the Migres Hall and thought about which peak to go to. Because he had left a voice transmission jade slip with Xiaogua, if the Xintian Peak Lord came out of seclusion, he would definitely be notified. Therefore, he was not worried about delaying things. Dong, dong, dong. The sky suddenly lit up, and the Divine Palace bell rang in the clouds. The morning sun rose slowly with the sound of the bell. The 7 peaks of the Divine Palace became lively again. On Taiwei Peak, the fragrance of herbs filled the air. On Uni Peak, there was a formation light floating. On Yaoguang Peak, there was the sound of instruments and instruments. On Daozong Peak, there was a hubbub of voices. On Xintian Peak, there was the sound of iron being forged again. On Mizang Hall, there was a deafening battle cry. The atmosphere of the 7 peaks was different. Although they were very far away, the different styles of cultivation atmosphere were clearly transmitted to Qin Hao's spiritual awareness. On the other hand, Migres Peak seemed especially cold. As the main peak of the Divine Palace, Migres Hall has no cultivation atmosphere at all, Qin Hao said. Then, he looked in the direction of Daozong Peak. It was the liveliest there, and the sound of people was overwhelming. That was it. Daozong Peak had the most disciples. Xiaohan, Ke-er, Wuk, Zhou Wudao, and Qin Hao knew more than half of them. They were all from Daozong Peak and were Lord Daozong Peak. As the saying goes, a day after a day, without seeing you, I'll make a trip to Daozong Peak. I'll let Han's word, Qin Hao said with a smile. He glanced at the hall robes on his body and saw the word authority embroidered on his chest. He raised his head and puffed out his chest, leaping into the air. The Migres Hall's unique flying praying mat flickered beneath his feet. However, at this moment, a huge gust of air suddenly rushed towards him from behind. It was extremely sudden, and Qin Hao felt as if a hurricane had brushed past his shoulder. The gust of wind blew against his face, and his hair fluttered wildly. His body flew out uncontrollably. This is translation, that is translation. Translation, this is translation. Not only did she not greet him, she even charged at him twice in a row. No matter what, you've successfully attracted my attention. Qin Hao stared at Daozong Peak. He could not take this lying down. Don't think I won't touch you just because you're my peak. However, it seems like I can't beat you. You're up early. I heard you went to Xintian Dojo yesterday and showed off in front of Tian Quebec. You also used your identity as a Migres Hall disciple to be arrogant again. Did you enjoy it? Lord Migres's bell-like laughter was heard as he stepped out of Migres Hall. It's SOSO. It's not really enjoyable. But speaking of arrogance, someone was even more arrogant than me, Qin Hao said angrily. Who? Why didn't I see it? Lord Migres was stunned. Someone was arrogant at Migres Peak. You didn't see it? Qin Hao was angry. He pointed at Daozong Peak. Fly over there. You're lying with your eyes wide open. What's wrong with you? There's only you and me here. Where did a third person come from? Did you become muddle-headed from studying forging? Elder Migres said with a sullen face. He did not even call him master. Good, you're good. Qin Hao turned around and flew away on his praying mat. It was obvious that he was bullying them together. Old third, you still haven't paid your respects to your master. Didn't you say you'd praise me once in the morning and once in the afternoon, and we'd even have supper tonight? Elder Migres was so angry that he stomped his feet. The new disciple had shown his true colors on the second day of entering the sect. How shameless. Forget it. Who asked him to be so talented? He could not bear to teach him a lesson. They flew all the way to Daozong Peak. This peak senior had indeed provoked Qin Hao. Eastern Sky and Chong Yu had teamed up to hide it from him. The old man at home had also joined in the act. They thought it was fun, but Qin Hao did not think it was fun at all. Fine. He chased her to Daozong Peak and made her apologize. Daozong Temple. Below the magnificent ancient temple, Lord Daozong had personally set up a platform and opened a training hall to explain the way of cultivation to the disciples. Such an opportunity was very rare. Once a disciple entered the Divine Palace, they would only have a few chances in their life. Naturally, they would cherish it. At this moment, many disciples came. Regardless of whether it was the older disciples or the new disciples, there was a sea of people in the training hall. As far as the eye could see, there were close to 1,000 people. It was a beautiful scene. After all, Daozong Peak was the place with the most disciples of the Divine Palace. The number of disciples in Daozong Peak was enough to account for half of the total number of disciples in the Divine Palace. At this time, in the front row of the vast training hall, there were many extraordinary figures sitting on praying mats. The most eye-catching ones were the female disciples, such as Xiaohan, Ke-er, and Fairy Qianning. Many male disciples looked at them with a faint admiration. Next, Shou Wuk, Zhou Wudao, Feng Qinli, and the others were also very outstanding. After all, they were the personal disciples of Lord Daozong among this batch of new disciples. Qin Hao drove the praying mat to the foot of the mountain gate and walked step by step into the training hall. His footsteps were light and slow. He did not dare to disturb old man Daozong and ruin the atmosphere of the lecture. He chose a corner and sat down. Through the layers of figures, he accurately found Xiao Han at the front. Xiao Han was in the first row and sat in the center of the core of the personal disciples. It was enough to show that Lord Daozong valued her very much. Qin Hao nodded with satisfaction. Old man Daozong treated Han well. Of course, this also proved the girl's talent. After all, the Divine Palace was not a place that only looked at appearance. Everyone here was very outstanding and not so superficial. In the outside world, appearance might be able to charm people. But in the Divine Palace, potential, talent, and strength were the foundation of admiration. In cultivation, most people focus on high-level cultivation techniques, combat skills, and whether or not they have a peerless divine soldier. They often neglect the most basic cultivation of martial arts. At this time, Lord Daozong sat on the platform majestically. On either side of him stood 6 elders with extremely restrained auras. Below the elders, several dignified disciples stood with their hands behind their backs. Without exception, these disciples who stood with the elders had all reached the great emperor realm. They were the personal disciples of the previous peak master. Now they stood here for 2 reasons. One was to listen to the lecture, and the other was to intimidate, or rather, to show off. Perfected Lord Daozong was a person who placed a lot of importance on ceremony. The more great emperors around him, the more powerful he would be. After all, they were all experts he had taught, and he wanted to motivate the new disciples below him. Qin Hao listened quietly. Old man Daozong's voice was full of a kind of magic, coupled with his dignified but not angry old-fashioned appearance. It seemed that no matter what he said, it was always right. He continued, "The disciples of Daozong Peak are the most outstanding talents in the 4 regions of the continent. Many of them are proud and think that their talent is unparalleled. They think that only high-level cultivation techniques and a peerless divine soldier are worthy of their status." I'm sure that some people have begun to complain in private. They think that I'm talking nonsense and that it's more important to teach you a few sets of emperor techniques. But have you ever thought about a question? Why is there a difference in strength between martial artists in the same realm? This situation does not only happen to ordinary martial artists, but also to soul essence geniuses like you. Why is there a difference in strength between people in the same realm and even learning the same kind of cultivation technique? Even when a fight breaks out, one side will be crushed. For example, those who pass the assessment of the 5 rings will be stronger than those who were eliminated. But those who were eliminated will be able to crush those in the same realm when they return to the outside world. Is it really just a matter of the strength of the cultivation technique? Replying to Master, different talents and different foundations will naturally result in differences in the process of postnatal cultivation. A voice rang out. It was Head Wu Quebec. True Lord Daozong nodded and stroked his beard. That's right, but you didn't get to the point. I made it clear that even among ordinary martial artists, there will be differences in strength between those in the same realm. This has nothing to do with talent. This show what paused and began to think. Cultivation starts from the moment you step onto the martial path. Many of you were born in martial arts families and started cultivating at a young age. At that time, your elders paid more attention to the speed of cultivation and would often compare children of the same age. Children with higher realms were regarded as geniuses, while those with lower realms were not suitable for cultivation and were considered trash. Pedantic, simply too pedantic. True, Lord Daozong snorted. At this moment, many of the disciples felt the same way. After all, it had happened to them before. The strength of cultivation does not depend on the speed of growth. Everyone has different physiques and can withstand different amounts of spirit chi. Some people have shallow sea of spirit chi and only need 3 days of spirit chi to break through to the next realm. Some people have deep sea of spirit chi and often need more spirit chi. However, if you fight again on the day of the breakthrough, you will find that the person who won earlier will become the loser in the end. This is cultivation. Master, What you mean is to constantly temper oneself, Zhou Wudao said. Yes. True Lord Daozong nodded and glanced in Zhou Wudao's direction with a satisfied expression. No matter the realm, the strength of the physical body, the strength of spirit qi, and even the meridians and bones of the body, they are the key. They determine how destructive the power of your attacks will be and how destructive the techniques you use will be. They are the source, the so-called foundation of martial arts. In martial arts cultivation, from the body-tempering realm to the yuan gathering realm is a watershed. After the yuan gathering realm, one can absorb the spirit qi of heaven and earth and use the sea of spirit qi to transform it into substantial spirit qi. Thus, there will be two major cultivation directions. One is to continue tempering the physical body, and the other is to temper the spirit qi. However, the strength of the spirit qi you use is still inseparable from the tolerance of the meridians. It is the same for the saint realm. As everyone knows, when a martial artist enters the saint realm, it is a great leap in life. At that time, it is not the realm that leaps, but your physical body and meridians. When you enter the saint realm, the power of your spirit qi is terrifying. A saint can destroy mountains with a wave of his hand. Qin Hao nodded. The yuan gathering realm and the saint realm were indeed the two watersheds of martial arts. After that was the emperor realm. Presumably, true Lord Daozong would begin to explain the basics of the emperor realm. Entering the emperor realm was the goal of all the disciples present. Chapter 1439. On the path of cultivation, no matter what level you reach, be it cultivation methods, martial arts techniques, or divine soldier weapons, they're all ways to strengthen your attacks. Only by constantly tempering yourself can you achieve the great path. And it's not a bad thing to grow quickly. No matter how weak a person is, as long as his level is high enough, he will have an absolute advantage. After Lord Daozong finished speaking, he stretched out his palm. In an instant, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth surged madly towards the void. The void rumbled, and the whistling palm qi was like a towering mountain that broke through the clouds. The skies seemed to have collapsed, and the thousands of disciples in the training hall were all in awe. There's no palm technique in it. It's just the most ordinary palm qi. Qin Hao murmured. Palm qi could be used by any martial artist. But because Lord Daozong was a great emperor, his ordinary palm qi could be said to be destructive. This was the advantage brought by the level. Ordinary moves could not be countered. You can all see that my palm qi is very ordinary. But if I use an emperor-level palm qi, its power will be even stronger. But it can only scare you. If a great emperor were to fight against me, this palm qi would not be able to hurt him at all. Lord Daozong looked at everyone with a smile. So, if you want to win against someone of the same level, you have to constantly temper yourself and let your foundation be deeper than your opponent's. Even if you enter the great emperor realm, this rule is still valid. Everyone was shocked. It was finally the great emperor realm. The great emperor realm mobilizes the power of heaven and earth and transforms rules to suppress all life. The rules are a part of your body. They exist in your spirit, your will, and even your flesh. When great emperors fight, whoever has the stronger rules will be stronger. Lord Daozong spoke very seriously. This was the key to his teaching today. The great emperor realm used the will of the emperor to mobilize the power of heaven and earth, transmuting the rules and giving birth to the great path. Master is telling us that the method to temper the will of the great emperor needs to start from the martial artist's spirit, will, and even blood. Showuk asked. He was born with the power of rules and could be said to be the pride of the heavens. At first, he did not know what was special about this ability. Even now, he was still confused about the understanding of rules. Wuk's words are correct. I heard that you were born with a sword Dao law called piercing. It can ignore a martial artist's defense. If you want to strengthen your law of penetration and make it stronger, you have to start with your willpower and spirit. However, everyone's understanding of martial arts cultivation is different. Even if they have the same power of rules, it will be divided according to one's comprehension. It will depend on who has a more thorough comprehension. After the Taoist scripture was finished, everyone committed it to memory. At the same time, many disciples cast envious glances at Showuk. Up until today, they finally understood why Showuk was strong, and it was actually because he was born with the laws of the Sword Tao. This made many senior disciples feel envious. After all, the rules were not so easy to comprehend. Showuk was very lucky. All right, today's lesson will end here. I believe that after listening to it, you'll have a deeper understanding of martial arts cultivation. Next, let's use this as a topic to discuss whether talent or hard work is more important in cultivation. Let's all express our opinions. Taoist scripture waved his hand and left the time for the disciples. The next moment, the training hall immediately fell into a discussion, but most of them whispered and did not dare to stand up and speak. Sister, which one do you think is more important? Kay asked Xiaohan. Talent. Xiaohan replied. Not necessarily. Many seniors in the Water Jade Holy Empire were not outstanding when they were young. They relied on hard work to improve and eventually surpass their peers and achieved great achievements. Fairy Qian Ning disagreed. Which one do you think is more important? Showuk looked at Zhou Wudao beside him. Only children would choose. Of course, both are important. Zhou Wudao replied. Wuk, tell us which one is more important. On the podium, perfected Lord Taoist scripture spoke. Master, talent, and hard work are equally important. Showuk stood up and replied. Does anyone have a different opinion? Taoist scripture looked at all the disciples in the training hall. Master, both are equally important. Nearly 1,000 disciples bowed their heads and expressed the same opinion as Showuk. Only a fool would choose a trick to trick children. No, I think that a martial artist talent is more important. At this moment, a voice sounded from the corner of the training hall. Although the voice was not loud, it was unique among the orderly responses. Immediately, all the disciples turned their heads and saw a young man wearing a green robe with the word Quan printed on his chest. His white hair fluttered in front of his forehead as he sat down with a smile. Qin Hao. Duwuk smiled. He had actually come. Moreover, he hadn't even said a word of greeting. This guy. Zhou Wudao glared at Qin Hao fiercely. He wanted to go against him again. He was really his nemesis. Brother Qin Hao. Xiaohan raised his hand slightly and waved. Qin Hao nodded and smiled. Migre's palace disciple, you are Qin Hao. I heard that your talent in the 5th arena test was extremely strong. Tell me, why do you think that a martial artist talent is more important? Daozong did not have the slightest intention of avoiding the topic. A touch of kindness appeared on his old-fashioned and dignified face as he asked, Ahem, martial uncle Daozong, talent is of course the most important. For example, between an essence soul martial artist and an ordinary martial artist, the former has a far greater advantage than the latter in terms of learning ability and cultivation speed. As time passes, the gap between the two will grow larger and larger until it is out of reach. Moreover, essence soul martial artists themselves have a certain special ability. You said before that when a martial artist enters the Emperor's path, they use the Emperor's intent to mobilize the power of heaven and earth and derive the power of the rules to suppress their life. The strength of the rules depends on the martial artist's willpower, spirit, and even martial comprehension. Let me ask you, between an essence soul martial artist with a strange flame and an ordinary martial artist without an essence soul, who has a stronger comprehension of flames? Or between a genius with a sword soul and an ordinary sword master, who can summon stronger sword chi? Qin Hao's gaze swept across the training hall. At this moment, Daozong and the thousands of people seemed to be struggling. This logic seemed to be correct. In his previous life, Qin Hao had cultivated to the level of Dendi by relying on exquisite skills and tireless struggle and hard work. However, at that time, he did not have an essence soul. It took him a few hundred years to reach this level. In this life, Qin Hao had the power of 3 soul spirits. In less than 10 years, he had entered the Emperor realm. He knew better than anyone else how important an essence soul was. Of course, entering the Emperor realm was not purely due to the essence soul. It was also inseparable from his previous life's experience in alchemy. However, this was enough to prove the importance of an essence soul. According to what you said, people without talent do not need to work hard. Their fate is already decided. What do you think of all the martial artists in the world who work hard to cultivate? Feng Qinli stood up and said, no matter how important talent was, a person's hard work could not be slandered and trampled on. Today, true Lord Daozong had opened the lecture hall to say that no matter what realm one reached, hammering oneself was the foundation of the great path. In other words, it was tantamount to telling everyone to work hard to cultivate. However, Qin Hao's suggestion was the opposite of Daozong's. Who did he think he was? What right did he have to refute true Lord Daozong? When did you hear me say that martial artists do not need to work hard? A martial artist's talent and hard work do not conflict. Let's talk about talent first, then hard work. If you don't even have talent and only have a burning heart, how can you compare to someone who is more talented and hardworking than you? You and I are proof of this. Qin Hao glanced at Feng Qinli and jumped out to take the lead. Feng Qinli was suddenly a loss for words. He was so anxious that he secretly clenched his fists. Of course, I don't mean to slander hard work. Under the premise of hard work, a strong talent will appear to be superior. Qin Hao cupped his hands and saluted true Lord Daozong. He had come to listen to the lecture, not to tear down Daozong's platform. You have an opinion. How about this? Can a disciple of Daozong Peak come out and compare notes with Qin Hao? Let's see how strong a martial artist's talent can be. Daozong said, Feng Qinli, as my personal disciple and a disciple of the Sword Emperor of the East Continent, your talent in swordsmanship is naturally extraordinary. Why don't you compare notes with Qin Hao? Feng Qinli glanced in Qin Hao's direction and felt a chill in his heart. In his mind, he could not help but think of the terrible scene of the war drums being destroyed, the golden bell flying, and the 10 statues fusing into one. He coughed heavily twice. Along with the coughing, his spirit seemed to be weakened. His voice also became weaker. I just entered the Divine Palace. Daozong Peak is too high and too humid. Unfortunately, I caught a cold. Cough, cough, my condition is not good. I'm afraid I'll disgrace you, Master. All the disciples were stunned. A cold? Daozong's face darkened slightly. He turned to look at Shou Wuck and said, Wuck, you're here. You didn't catch a cold, did you? Disciple is untalented. I cannot exchange blows with Qin Hao. Disciple's sword is a sword used to kill. Unless Master wishes to see one of us fall, said Qin Hao. Shou Wuck said seriously. He was not afraid. He was just stating the facts. This seemed like a small competition, but in fact, it concerned the reputation of Migres Palace and Daozong Palace. Old Man Daozong was an extremely prideful person. Shou Wuck naturally had to do his best in this battle. If he did so, someone would definitely fall between him and Qin Hao. You're so serious. Zhou Wu Dao, it's your turn. Old Man Daozong did not want anything to happen to Shou Wuck. He still valued disciples who were born with the rules of swordsmanship. Cough, cough, cough. I caught a cold. Zhou Wu Dao suddenly fell to the ground and coughed violently. Shou Wuck glanced at him coldly. Come on, even if you're pretending, you should at least pretend. But then again, no one in this batch of new disciples would be willing to be Qin Hao's opponent. This is strange. Perfected Lord Daozong glared angrily. Who would catch a cold? Is the humidity on Daozong Peak really that high? Or do they get scared by Qin Hao? Then he looked at Xiaohan. Xiaohan's talent was the most outstanding among this batch of new disciples. She could be called the hope of this generation of Daozong Peak. However, when he saw the love flowing in Xiaohan's eyes, he immediately dismissed the idea of letting her fight. Master, I'm willing to see junior brother Qin Hao's talent in Migres Palace. At this moment, a voice sounded from below. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice. They saw a young man standing in the 10th row of the vast training hall. He had a very straight figure and a bearing like a divine spear. It's the senior brother from the previous batch. Shou Wuck could not help but become serious. He saw that the disciple was surrounded by surging golden flames. It was obvious that he was an upper-level emperor. Qin Hao could naturally deal with an ordinary high-level origin emperor. However, none of the disciples of Daozong Peak were ordinary. Qin Hao has met a tough opponent this time. Zhou Wudao peeked from the ground. Even he was not a match for this senior brother from Daozong Peak. Chapter 1440. In the training hall, Lord Daozong had finished teaching. Next, there would be a spar to verify the impact of talent between warriors. The training hall was silent. No one in the new batch of disciples was willing to step out. Qin Hao's performance in the Fallen Emperor Bei test was obvious to all, and there were only a few people who could match him. Among those few people, Shou Wuk, who was born with the rules of the sword, was not confident that he could win. As for the others, how could they overestimate themselves and step out? For a time, Qin Hao of Migres Palace alone suppressed all the disciples of Daozong Peak. The glory of the direct disciple of the Palace Lord was very eye-catching. But for Lord Daozong, it was a little embarrassing. Approved. Daozong said, it was ungentlemanly to let the older disciples fight Qin Hao, who had just entered the Divine Palace 2 days ago. But Daozong had no choice. But this spar would definitely be a fair fight. Daozong Peak would not take advantage of Qin Hao because of their realm advantage. All the disciples in the training hall dispersed, revealing a vast space in the center. The only disciple left stood facing Qin Hao. This spar, when the older disciple spoke, instantly captured everyone's hearts. Among the new batch of disciples, Qin Hao was undoubtedly the strongest. What could his so-called talent do against the older disciple? Everyone was looking forward to it. However, some people who had a good relationship with Qin Hao were a little worried. But even if they failed, the older disciple of Daozong Peak would not hurt Qin Hao. Daozong Palace, Yuhui. The young man said. Migres Palace, Qin Hao. Qin Hao said. Their gazes met, and a formless pressure could be felt between them. Both of them had serious expressions on their faces. Although Qin Hao was a new disciple who had just entered the Divine Palace, he was the disciple of the Migres Palace Lord. The younger brother of the Palace Lord was so talented that Yu Hui did not dare to underestimate him. Eastern Sky, who had entered the Migres Palace last time, had now reached the Great Emperor Realm. Yu Hui, who was in the same batch, had not reached the Great Emperor Realm. Qin Hao, who was standing in front of him, was Eastern Sky's junior brother. His talent was on the same level as Eastern Sky's. Yu Hui didn't dare to underestimate Qin Hao. Qin Hao was the same. Yu Hui was reserved and calm, but his body contained an unparalleled sharpness. He was definitely a rare opponent. This could be seen from where he sat in the training hall. The 10th row, with nearly 1,000 people, was very close to the front. Yu Hui was clearly a second-class disciple from the previous batch. Furthermore, he was one of the best among the second-class disciples. He was roughly on par with Qin Yun and Ah Ku, but slightly weaker than the first-class geniuses. Junior brother Qin Hao, I'm at the peak of the 9th level Emperor Realm, and you're at the 2nd level. This battle isn't fair to you, so I'll suppress my cultivation to the same level as yours. When the time comes, we'll use everything we have, whether it's origin energy or origin soul. Yu Hui said seriously. This was not contempt, but respect. Senior brother Yu Hui and Sheng Sheng were once so close, but they just brushed past each other. Zhou Wudao smiled evilly. This Yu Hui had dug a hole for himself. In that case, there's no more suspense. Shou Wuk had been quite spirited, but now he simply closed his eyes. Xiao Han breathed a sigh of relief. Senior brother Yu's integrity was worthy of respect. He only hoped that he wouldn't regret it later. The subtle changes below naturally did not escape the attention of the elders and the top disciples of Daozong Peak, who were standing on both sides of the podium. At the head of the top disciples, a young man with an extraordinary temperament smiled at Daozong and said, Master, it seems that Qin Hao is very important in the hearts of this batch of juniors. This young man's name was Sheng Hua. His status was on par with Eastern Sky and Tian Quebec. He was also the chief disciple of a peak and the strongest eldest disciple of Daozong Peak. He could infer from Shou Wuk, Zhou Wudao, and Xiao Han's expressions that even Yu Hui might not be able to defeat Qin Hao. Someone chosen by Senior Uncle Migres is bound to be monstrously talented. However, no matter how outstanding he is, he hasn't been baptized by the Divine Palace. How can he be a match for junior brother Yuhui? Senior brother, you overestimate him. On the opposite side of Shenghua, a disciple standing at the head of the table spoke with an equally imposing manner. He was the second disciple of Lord Daozong. His name was Shimu. His cultivation was in the great emperor realm. He was slightly weaker than Shenghua, but not by much. You think Yuhui will win? Shenghua smiled. Definitely. Shimu's sharp eyes looked at the platform. When they fell on Qin Hao and Yuhui, he seemed to have already seen the outcome. Nothing is absolute in this world. Junior brother, don't jump to conclusions too early. Shenghua smiled. Shut your mouths and just watch, Daozong said in a low voice. At this moment, he was a little uncertain. Generally speaking, no matter how outstanding a new disciple was, it was impossible for him to defeat a senior disciple who had cultivated for hundreds of years in the Divine Palace. Moreover, Yu Hui's ability was not bad in the entire Daozong Peak. But why did Qin Hao have an indescribable feeling that made Daozong's heart palpitate? Outside the platform, Qin Hao raised his hand and saluted. Senior brother, I appreciate your kindness, but you don't have to suppress your cultivation to the same level as mine. Just make your move, junior brother, Yu Hui said. His clothes swelled up, and a fierce golden brilliance swept out from under his clothes. The brilliance continued to weaken until finally his aura stabilized at the second level of the Emperor realm. He was a man of his word. All right, senior brother Yu, be careful, Qin Hao said. He stomped his foot on the ground and shot forward. He didn't use the art of endless samsara, nor did he use his chi or soul. The simplest of punches pierced through the air with a sonic boom. This punch was extremely powerful. Stop! Yu Hui spread his feet apart and waited for the right moment. Like a boulder rooted to the ground, he stood firm and reached out with one hand to grab Qin Hao. However, when the fist and palm collided, a ferocious force penetrated his palm and shook his entire body. Yu Hui felt like there was a ferocious beast in front of him that wanted to overturn him. He was forced to retreat. What a strong physical strength! Shimu was slightly surprised. It was obvious that he had underestimated Qin Hao. Junior brother Qin Hao defeated Yu Hui with a single punch in the same realm. I'm afraid his foundation is not inferior to the madmen of Mizang Hall and Tianxin Hall, Shenghua said. True Lord Daozong had just said that the difference between cultivators of the same realm was a matter of foundation. Yu Hui's physical strength was obviously not as strong as Qin Hao's. It's just physical strength. A cultivator's strength is not measured by physical strength alone. Besides, brute force is not junior brother Yu's forte. His strength is his chi, Shimu said. Although Qin Hao was slightly weaker, it didn't mean that he could defeat Yu Hui. Shimu, Qin Hao is not trained in the Divine Palace. He has only been here for 2 days and only learned some forging skills from Tian Ke in Tianxin Hall. Yu Hui entered Daozong Peak at the same time as us and was washed by the Spirit Stream waterfall. You know how strong his physical strength is. Not to mention outsiders, how many people in Daozong Peak can defeat him? Shenghua looked at Shimu. Qin Hao had been in the Divine Palace for 2 days and was almost the same as the outsiders. It was rare for him to suppress Yu Hui in terms of strength. Shimu seemed to be prejudiced against Qin Hao. Don't talk nonsense. I don't mean anything in front of Master, Shimu said coldly. That's enough. You were taught a lesson by Eastern Sky. Even if you have a thorn in your heart, don't poke Qin Hao who just entered the Divine Palace. If you have the ability, go to Eastern Sky and save face. If you talk too much, you too will go to Xiantian Peak to refine 50,000 pounds of purple rock essence. True Lord Daozong scolded, and Shenghua and Shimu immediately shut up. Purple rock was definitely a powerful weapon of the Divine Palace. Outside the field, Yu Hui was shocked that Qin Hao had repelled him with one blow. This was enough to prove that he was suppressed in terms of strength. Huh? Yu Hui roared, and the golden essence, qi, around him raged. He didn't run up to Qin Hao to compete with brute force. Instead, he cleverly and decisively changed the way he fought. He formed a spell with his hands, and the essence chi around him spiraled into a whistling storm. In the storm, Long spears condensed from essence chi flew out. They were extremely sharp. The golden spears lined up and stabbed towards Qin Hao's head. Water wind dodge. Essence chi poured into the soles of his feet. Qin Hao's steps were agile. He weaved through the rain of spears with movements that ordinary people couldn't understand and avoided the fierce attacks. Immediately, he closed in and punched again. He still didn't use the art of endless samsara. Still not using essence chi? Yu Hui asked. His palm flashed, and the essence chi spear formed. The spear shot out like a dragon and aimed at Qin Hao's chest. Not fast enough. Qin Hao was anxious. Without essence chi, it was difficult to keep up with Yu Hui's speed. He would be injured before he could hit Yu Hui. He could only do as Yu Hui wished. Buzz! His essence chi flowed and flashed. A bright sword light appeared in his palm. Qin Hao gathered essence chi into a sword, and the sword light pierced out. It broke through the space and collided with the tip of the spear. There was a sound of metal clashing in the air, but the next moment, the sword light was shattered by the tip of the spear. Sword shield, Qin Hao shouted. Yu Hui's essence chi was extraordinarily strong. The condensed spear shattered his sword chi. An even more majestic golden light shrouded down and turned into a heavy sword in front of him. The sharp spear light touched the back of the sword, and Qin Hao felt a tearing sensation in his soul. Immediately after, he retreated quickly and slashed down with his heavy sword. A surging flame aura slashed towards the golden spear that was thrusting towards him. Junior brother, your essence chi is lacking. Yu Hui's expression did not change. The tip of the spear swept and cut the flame sword light. At this time, the two once again pulled apart the distance, but neither of them made a move. The scene fell into a temporary silence, as if they were both thinking about their next move. Qin Hao really thinks he is invincible. He dares to challenge the senior brother of the previous generation. Feng Qianli sneered. Yu Hui's spear chi was indeed powerful. If you don't understand, then shut up. Qin Hao's essence chi strength is far inferior to the level of the golden bell he sent flying in Fallen Emperor Bei. Shou Wuke clearly noticed that Qin Hao's essence chi was weak. It was not the same as before. So what? Can you win if you're stronger? You should give up that ridiculous idea, Feng Qianli said. After all, Yu Hui was a disciple of the previous generation and had been honed in the Divine Palace. His essence chi strength was not something they could compare with. If this is the talent of junior brother Qin Hao, then it is a little disappointing, Yu Hui said expressionlessly. He slowly raised his palm, and the golden spear floated in his palm. With a wave of his hand, the spear turned into a shadow and shuttled out like a poisonous dragon. Although Qin Hao was a new disciple and had not been tempered by the Daozong spiritual stream waterfall like him, if he entered Migre's palace at this level, he would be a disgrace to the identity of Eastern Sky's junior brother, let alone be a disciple of the Migre's palace lord. I will not disappoint you. Qin Hao raised his arm. In his eyes, the golden spear was getting closer and closer, like a golden dragon that was about to swallow him. At this moment, a mysterious and unpredictable power was born. Qin Hao's long hair moved without wind. The art of endless samsara flowed in his body, and the quality of the essence chi in his sea of chi underwent a shocking change. Streams of essence chi surged like golden liquid. When they flowed through his meridians, the dragon jade technique constantly compressed them. The golden light that appeared in Qin Hao's palm became more and more dazzling. Then he spat out a word cut. Boom! As the word fell, there was a whistling sound in the void. A sharp golden sword shadow fell and cut the golden spear. The spear shaft cracked and broke. There is a change. Yu Hui was shocked. Qin Hao's essence chi seemed to have become stronger. On both sides of the podium, Shenghua's eyes flashed with a strange light. He smiled slightly. On the other hand, Shermu's face was a little ugly. Yu Feng's essence chi was suppressed again. Chapter 1441. In a contest of strength, Yu Hui was obviously inferior to Qin Hao, which surprised both Shenghua and Shermu. But then, both sides changed their attacks. Yu Hui had cultivated qi for hundreds of years in the Divine Palace. His qi was so strong that he instantly turned the tables and suppressed Qin Hao. In the eyes of the higher-ups of Daozong Peak, this was normal. No matter how talented Qin Hao was, he lacked the training of the Divine Palace's special methods. His foundation could not be stronger than Yu Hui's. Unexpectedly, just as Yu Hui gained the upper hand, the battle changed again. The sword fell from the sky, and Yu Hui's qi spear was cut in half. It seemed that Qin Hao's qi was suddenly strengthened. This is a cultivation method. Shermu's eyes were fixed on Qin Hao. At this moment, Qin Hao was standing in the middle of the field. His long hair danced in the wind, and his golden yuan qi flowed through his robes like liquid. Together with the Quan character on his chest, he exuded an awe-inspiring and domineering aura. It was as if he was a completely different person from before. Under his rising aura, Yu Hui seemed to be weakened. Qi below the Saint Plane is like mist. It can greatly strengthen a warrior's attack, but it is still limited by the rules of nature. Only when one has stepped onto the Saint Plane can his qi exist in liquid form. When he circulates it, it is like a surging river, a raging sea overturning the sky, and destroying mountains is nothing difficult. But I have never seen a warrior below the Emperor realm condense his qi into a solid form. Shenghua's eyes were as solemn as Shermu's, trying to see through Qin Hao. Qin Hao's qi was very different from others. Even a warrior at the peak of the Emperor realm could release his qi in liquid form. Yu Hui's body and qi were far stronger than those of the outside world because he had been tempered by Daozong Peak's spirit stream waterfall for 100 years. Even so, his qi only had a tendency to solidify, but there was still a big gap between it and the real step. Only when one stepped into the Emperor realm could their qi be condensed into a solid form. With the support of spiritual will, they could transform into anything. Although Qin Hao's yuan qi wasn't as condensed as the yuan qi of the Emperor realm, it was infinitely close to being corporeal. It was even stronger than Yu Hui's yuan qi, which was simply unbelievable. It is indeed a cultivation technique. This brat's vital qi root base is indeed not as strong as Yu Feng's, but he is currently using a cultivation technique that compresses vital qi. This cultivation technique is so powerful that it is rarely seen in the world. I'm afraid its grade is not any weaker than Daozong Peak's Empress Hua Holy Spirit Art. True Lord Daozong's eyes were sharp. His gaze seemed to have penetrated Qin Hao's body, capturing the flow of every strand of yuan qi in his meridians. However, he could not tell at which stage Qin Hao's yuan qi had suddenly become stronger. What? Shenghua and Shermu were equally shocked. The Empress Hua Holy Spirit Art was one of the treasures of Daozong Peak. Only direct disciples could cultivate it. It was definitely a top-notch emperor-grade treasure. How could Qin Hao, a person from the mortal world, possess a shocking cultivation art that was not inferior to Empress Hua's Holy Spirit Art? It will be very difficult for junior brother Yu to take down Qin Hao without using his essence soul. Shenhua was getting more and more interested. He glanced at Shermu. At this moment, Shermu did not refute. His expression was obviously not as relaxed as before, but his heart would not waver. So what if Qin Hao had a powerful cultivation technique? Naturally, Yui had one too. Although it was not as powerful as Empress Hua's Holy Spirit Art, it was still a mid-grade Emperor Realm cultivation technique of Daozong Peak. Junior brother Qin Hao has some skills. Yui finally became serious. Although Qin Hao used a cultivation technique to strengthen his yuan qi, talent was a factor in whether he could successfully cultivate a cultivation technique. Not all cultivation techniques in the world were suitable for martial artists. Often, the higher the grade of a cultivation technique, the more difficult it was to cultivate and the more painful the torture. This was something that Yu Hui had experienced before. Sword of the Heavens. Qin Hao pointed his sword at the sky. His boundless will rushed up to the heavens, causing the void to tremble. Above the dome of heaven, a dazzling ball of light condensed and expanded unceasingly, piercing through the clouds and transforming into a gigantic sword that could split the heavens. It was like an inverted mountain peak, whistling through the air towards the training ground. Sword Sek's secret technique. What did you teach him? Zhang Qingqi looked at Shou Wuk in surprise. It seemed that during this period of time, the relationship between the two had deepened. Shou Wuk had even secretly taught his uncle's powerful sword technique to Qin Hao. He didn't give me a chance to show off. He just watched me use it once. Only when the familiar sword intent descended from the sky did Head Wu Ke open his eyes. The huge sword in the void that entered his eyes stunned him. Qin Hao's sword of the heavens could be said to have grasped the essence. It was not inferior to Shou Wuk, a top genius who had cultivated this technique since he was young. The spiritual energy turned into a sword in the clouds, borrowing the momentum of heaven and earth to open it. Using qi as a sword, it could bring down the sword will of the great path and kill the opponent. If Shou Wuk used it, he would not be stronger than Qin Hao. Monster, Zhang Qingqi murmured. After looking at it once, he stole it from Shou Wuk. This was the powerful technique of the southern region Sword Emperor. Good sword technique. Yu Hui looked up and felt the unparalleled sword will above his head. Cracks gradually appeared on the stone floor under his feet, as if it would be crushed into powder at any time. At the same time, the weight on his body increased. However, he could not move his feet. Qin Hao was firmly locked on to Yu Hui. He could not escape no matter what. Primordial Tao formula, peerless spear. Yu Hui stretched out his arms, and a dazzling golden dragon spear appeared in his palms. This spear was far from the spear that he had casually condensed before. An incomparably terrifying aura spread from the dragon spear. It was full of destructive power, and to a large extent, it was almost tangible. The roar of a dragon sounded from the training hall, shaking the hearts of everyone. Defeated by the primordial Tao formula, Qin Hao, as a new disciple, is not wronged. Mu revealed a relaxed smile. The primordial Tao formula was the ultimate technique of Daozong Peak, second only to the Empress Ward. Not to mention, Yu Hui had also used his spear technique. Go! Yu Hui roared and pushed the dragon spear with his palm. A huge dragon spear shadow whizzed up and rushed towards the giant sword. The surging roar resounded throughout the peak of Daozong Peak. Everyone's hearts trembled as they watched the battle with bated breaths. In the sky, two streaks of light collided with the void, and a loud rumble sounded in the void. The flying dragon spear shadow swallowed the giant's sword in one gulp. In the sky, the sword light disappeared, and only the shadow of the peerless spear remained. In the next moment, countless destructive sword chi burst out from the flying dragon's body, annihilating the dragon's body. The dragon spear also exploded, torn into pieces by the sword chi that filled the sky. Following this, the sword light also dissipated. In the training hall, Yu Hui's face was pale. A trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. There was a faint stabbing pain in his head, as if countless sword chi had pierced through it. He knew that he had lost this battle. Senior brother Yu, thank you for letting me win, Qin Hao said. Even if he did not use the indestructible samsara technique to its limit, he still defeated Yu Hui. But then again, if he did not use the technique, he would not be able to win. Yu Hui was very strong. He suppressed his cultivation to the same level as Qin Hao's, but he was still able to counter Qin Hao's strength. The disciples of the Divine Palace were indeed extraordinary. If it were an outsider, Qin Hao would not have to use the technique. Junior brother Qin is indeed the one chosen by Migre's palace. I have lost. Yu Hui, you want to bow your head without using the primordial spirit? On the podium, Mu bellowed and interrupted him. Senior brother Mu, Yu Hui looked ashamed. The primordial spirit is one of your talents. You did not use your full strength. Continue, Mu said. Yu Hui quietly clenched his fists, but seeing that Lord Daozong did not speak, he could only look at Qin Hao again and say, Junior brother Qin, let's play another round. I want to see your primordial spirit. Senior brother Yu, stop. You are indeed very good. Qin Hao immediately saluted Lord Daozong and turned to leave the training hall. If Hui had gone all out, he might have had a chance to win, but he suppressed his realm to the same level as Qin Hao's, so it was impossible for him to win. Even without the primordial spirit duel, Qin Hao could estimate the result. If they played another round, Hui would be even worse. Junior brother Qin Hao, you are the disciple of Migre's palace. If you do not receive well, and the palace does not blame you, we cannot afford to bear the consequences. Or if you did not use the primordial spirit because you look down on the disciples of Daozong Peak, then where is your so-called talent? Shermu said aggressively. Qin Hao stopped in his tracks and looked up at Shermu. He then glanced at perfected Lord Daozong. What do you think, Uncle Master? Let's play another round. I also want to see your talent in the primordial spirit. Hui, you don't have to suppress your realm. You are not Qin Hao's opponent in the same realm. You know how to control your strength. Don't use your realm too high and accidentally hurt Qin Hao. Lord Daozong said. Yes, Lord Daozong. Hui was helpless. He regretted blindly sticking his neck out. Junior brother Qin, I will use my primordial spirit as a spear. Please enlighten me. After he finished speaking, an incomparably dazzling golden light bloomed from Hui's body. A materialized soul spear materialized. A martial artist's primordial spirit was naturally more powerful than primordial qi. Under the Emperor realm, primordial qi could not materialize, but the primordial spirit could. This was the strength of a primordial spirit martial artist. Hui's primordial spirit was a spear. All right, unable to evade, Qin Hao could only continue fighting. Junior brother, be careful. I will raise my realm to the 4th level of the Emperor realm. With the soul spear in hand, Hui's temperament changed significantly. His aura became sharper, just like the soul spear in his hand. You can raise it to the 5th level of the Emperor realm. Qin Hao said, fire suppressed metal, so he should use the fire soul to deal with it. In this way, Hui's soul power attribute would be suppressed again. Moreover, the red lotus tyrannical fire was extremely ferocious. It was ranked 2nd on the wondrous flame list. Even if it was 3 levels higher than Qin Hao's, the strength of the two sides would probably reach a point where Hui would not be at a disadvantage. He's too arrogant again. Not only did he force senior brother Yu to use his primordial spirit, but he also took the initiative to ask for 3 levels higher. Does Qin Hao think the disciples of the Divine Palace are trash from the outside world? Feng Qianli sneered. If you don't have the courage to fight, please shut your mouth, lest I smell the stench in the air. Zhou Wudao said coldly. Feng Qianli's pupils suddenly shrank. He stabbed out like a sword and fell on Zhou Wudao, but it was like sinking into a quagmire. It had no effect. He could only sneer twice. The way of the spear, unhindered. Hui swept with his spear, and countless cold lights flew out from the spear, covering all directions of the training hall. Every cold light turned into a spear shadow, densely arranged around Qin Hao's body, completely sealing him in the space of the spear. It had to be admitted that with the improvement of his realm, Hui's primordial qi and soul power had been greatly enhanced. In the face of the countless spear shadows, Qin Hao felt like he was being penetrated. It was as if his body had turned into thousands of holes in an instant, and his blood could feel the chill from the spear. A disciple of the Divine Palace is a disciple of the Divine Palace, but my blood will not coagulate. Fire! Qin Hao clenched his right fist, and the primordial qi around his body instantly turned into a blood-red flame. Soul fire. Chapter 1442. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio full strength the flames were as eye-catching as blood, winding around Qin Hao's body, exuding a demonic aura that shook people's hearts. Just by standing there quietly, he gave off a powerful aura. At this moment, the temperature in the training hall rose steadily. The air and the ground distorted. Many disciples felt uncomfortable and used their soul power to resist the corrosion of the flames. Many people saw that the countless soul spears that Yu Hui released to surround Qin Hao were also covered by the flames. Drops of liquid flowed out, as if they were about to melt. It's the red lotus tyrannical flame. Daozong's pupils dilated. He stood up straight, then slowly sat down. At this moment, his voice was trembling. What he saw was the red lotus flame, known as the pinnacle of the mortal world. It was ranked second on the strange flame list, second only to the Dragon King flame. No one knew how terrifying the Dragon King flame was, and no one had tried it before. This was because its name only existed in legends, and it disappeared with the extinction of the dragon race's fire dragon bloodline. Not to mention the Dragon King flame. Even the red lotus flame, which was filled with demonic aura and was as red as blood, was extremely rare. The martial artists of later generations had probably never heard of this name. Even if they saw it, they probably wouldn't recognize it. However, true Lord Daozong knew of the existence of the red lotus flame. The red lotus flame was recorded in the Daozong Peak's Emperor techniques. No wonder he can control flames and melt 10 statues. With the red lotus flame's fire soul, Qin Hao's will of fire is innately at the peak of the fire Dao. Daozong nodded with a smile. Such talent couldn't be measured by strength. Qin Hao's talent in fire was probably the only one in the world. Tian Quan had taken in an amazing disciple. Of course, at this moment, Daozong couldn't help but be shocked. Qin Hao controlled the red lotus flame's fire soul, and it was already a great miracle that he wasn't burned to death. However, it was a disaster for Yu Hui. Red lotus tyrannical flame, the ultimate flame, ranked second on the strange flame list. Shermu's eyes were abnormally sharp, and a trace of uneasiness appeared on his calm face. It was obvious that he was a little nervous. After all, even if Yu Hui increased his cultivation level and was 2 layers higher than Qin Hao, he still wouldn't have an advantage in soul. Since the Dragon King flame had disappeared, the red lotus fire was practically the #1 flame in the world. In this battle of soul power, Qin had already gained the upper hand in terms of rank. Stab! Although Yu Hui didn't know that Qin Hao's soul fire was the red lotus tyrannical fire, he could feel how terrifying it was. After all, the soul spear he released was constantly weakening under the corrosion of the fire qi. Many of the spearheads had already disappeared. This flame was strong enough to melt Yu Hui's soul power. If he didn't attack now, the situation would become even more serious. Countless soul spears stabbed toward Qin Hao at the same time. In this world of spears, the entire training ground was filled with glaring spear light. I told you, your strength is not enough. Qin Hao clenched his fists tightly, and countless tongues of flame spewed out from the gaps between his fingers. The tongues of flame danced in the air, and whenever they wrapped around a soul spear, the soul spear would immediately be incinerated into nothingness. The raging tongues of flame turned into a hurricane that swept out, and in an instant, the dense forest of spears was annihilated. Flame explosion. Qin Hao slammed his fist into the ground. Flames surged from his fist and pierced through the ground like a crimson snake as they slithered toward Yu Hui. At the same time, a terrifying wave of heat erupted from the bottom of his feet. Yu Hui felt like his entire body was about to melt when the wave of heat hit his face. What a terrifying flame! Incomparably intense soul power erupted. Yu Hui dodged the flame explosion and swept his soul spear forward. Dozens of spear shadows containing astonishing power shot forth. Continue to increase your cultivation or admit defeat. You have no chance of winning if this continues. Qin Hao didn't move an inch. He lifted a palm and swept it out. Flames condensed into sharp, crimson swords that intersected with each other and destroyed the incoming spear shadows. 5th level Emperor Realm. Yu Hui had no choice but to continue increasing his cultivation. Even if he won this battle, it would be an unfair victory. On the other hand, if he still couldn't win after being 3 levels higher than Qin Hao, it would be even more humiliating. Yu Hui's expression was grave to the extreme. Boundless soul power poured into his soul spear, and his mind seemed to have fused with it as well. Accompanied by the hum of the spear, a golden storm appeared in his hand, and shot toward Qin Hao like an endless stream of golden light. Red Lotus explosive slash. Qin Hao pressed his palms together and chopped down with all his might. Waves of lava spewed out from his palms and slammed into the endless golden light. The two forces crashed into each other like two torrents. The golden light quickly retreated within the flames and dimmed. It was swallowed up bit by bit and was on the verge of disintegration. Qin Hao smiled. He knew that it was time to end this. Yu Hui's cultivation was 5th level Emperor Realm, but his soul power was suppressed by the Red Lotus tyrannical fire. He was still slightly inferior. Thinking up to this point, Qin Hao glanced in a certain direction. In an inconspicuous corner of the training hall, there was a woman dressed in a green hall robe. Her robe was imprinted with a majestic Quan character. She was the senior sister of the Migres Hall. At this moment, the senior sister was watching the battle with indifferent eyes. Qin Hao thought that if he could still defeat Yu Hui in such a situation, it would be enough to demonstrate the elegance of a disciple of the Migres Palace. His senior sister should have a lot of face. Later on, she would take the initiative to praise him and apologize to him. 7th level Emperor Realm. But Yu Hui didn't want to leave the battle like this. Sensing danger approaching, his spear light continued to melt under the corrosion of the flames. He actually released his cultivation and climbed to the 7th level Emperor Realm. As his cultivation rose, Yu Hui's vitality and soul power changed in all aspects. His power was incomparably vigorous like a gushing sea. The declining golden light crazily rose and destroyed the Red Lotus tyrannical fire in an instant. It mercilessly cut down Qin Hao. Senior brother Yu, Qin Hao didn't expect this scene. I'm sorry, junior brother Qin. Please use your full strength. Yu Hui shouted with an apologetic expression. He also wanted to stop, but could he? The Peak Master of Daozong Peak was sitting on the rostrum. Today, the Peak Master was preaching, and all the disciples were present. There was also the bad-tempered Shermu. Now that he had continuously increased his realm, if he still could not take advantage of Qin Hao, not to mention the Daozong True Lord, Shermu would not forgive him. Yu Hui couldn't do anything. Qin Hao, it's dangerous. Zhou Wudao's expression changed greatly. He cried out and stood up from his seat anxiously. Yu Hui was ruthless and didn't even care about his face. He was stronger than 5 levels, but he was going to deal with Qin Hao, who only had 1 soul. Where was the fairness from before? Don't worry, he can still handle it. Shouwuk held Zhou Wudao tightly. With so many high-level people present, this small test was no longer just a matter between 2 disciples. As a member of Daozong Peak, if Zhou Wudao dared to interfere, Shouwuk glanced at the platform. Shermu's expression was very bad. This senior brother was not to be trifled with. Strength of the dragon. Qin Hao gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. A surging aura erupted, stirring up a raging airflow. A ball of golden light that was even more dazzling than Yu Hui's spear radiance blossomed. Within the golden light, his body began to grow. Dragon scales quickly covered half of his face. Even his loose palace robes seemed to have been stuffed with many things, gradually bulging. Boom! The majestic golden spear aura swept over, and all of it was aimed at Qin Hao. The terrifying pressure pressed down on the dragon scales, and many of them were broken, but they quickly grew back. Qin Hao's growing body was repeatedly pushed back by the impact. His feet were like knives as they slashed across the ground of the training hall. The 2 marks and the broken stone floor were shocking to see. However, even if Yu Hui suddenly released his cultivation of the 7th level of the Emperor Realm, Qin Hao was still able to withstand it. A second soul. Daozong Peak was surprised. Of course, he wasn't surprised by Qin Hao's second soul. He was surprised by the form of the second soul, the sound of a dragon's roar, the soul of a dragon. This kid's skin is tough. He's not even injured. Shermu clenched his fists. No wonder Qin Hao and Yu Hui fought brute force, and the older generation of disciples of the Divine Palace was repelled. It turned out that his second soul was a beast soul, and it was an Overlord-level dragon soul. Red Lotus Overlord Fire. Giant Dragon Soul. The two highest grade source spirits were almost legendary, but now they were gathered in the body of a single person. This talent, how can this be? Yui was obviously very surprised. A 7th-level Emperor Realm cultivator hadn't seriously injured Qin Hao. He hadn't even drawn a single drop of blood. Two words appeared in his mind, along with the panic in his eyes. Monster. Senior brother you. You were the one who said you'd use your full strength. Don't blame me. Qin Hao roared and shot forward. His enormous body was like a dark cloud as he stomped heavily on Yu Hui's head. He towered in the air like a giant. His violent and ferocious aura made Yu Hui's scalp go numb. What had he done to provoke this time? Yu Hui's heart trembled, but he didn't dare be careless. His cultivation of the 7th level of the Emperor Realm condensed into the Soul Spear. A 30-meter-long spear stabbed into the ground. He roared madly and bent the entire spear. As Qin Hao's terrifying foot stomped down, Yu Hui loosened his grip and the spear whistled through the air, shaking the void. Creak! Both of them were extremely fast, and Qin Hao's feet instantly landed on the giant spear. With this stomp, the body of the spear was destroyed, and a cloud of black smoke exploded in the air. From the black smoke, a huge monster-like body fell out. Qin Hao's 2 feet shone with a dazzling light, as if they had become the most terrifying killing weapon in the world at this moment, and he still continued to land on Yu Hui's head. Yu Hui raised his head. His cheeks were covered in cold sweat. His expression was becoming more and more exaggerated. He'd never seen such a fighting style before. It was violent, fierce, and straightforward. There were no moves to speak of, and there were no openings to be found. His feet shook the world. 8th-level Emperor Realm. An even more turbulent soul force raged out. Yu Hui knew that he'd become the laughingstock of Daozong Peak after this battle, but he couldn't care less. He just wanted to end this battle as soon as possible and get away from Qin Hao's feet. Incomparably boundless origin energy gathered in his palms. At this moment, 2 enormous spear souls appeared behind Yu Hui. One was suffused with a dark luster. The other was snow-white and shiny. They were both twin soul spirits. The only difference was that both of Yu Hui's soul spirits were spears. No wonder Senior Brother Yu's spear light is so sharp. Sho Wuk remarked. Ordinary twin soul or 3-soul geniuses naturally couldn't fuse their soul force due to the different types of soul spirits. Their strength would be weakened to a certain extent. However, Yu Hui was different. His twin spear souls could fuse, and when the time came, their power would only increase. Unfortunately for him, his opponent was Qin Hao, a monster who could withstand even Sho Wuk's sword Dao. Go! Both of his soul spirits shot out. Black and white spear shadows tore through the air at the same time. Yu Hui was giving it his all by activating his 8th-level Emperor Realm. At this moment, he felt a burning sensation on his face, as if he'd been slapped several times. At the same time, he was keenly aware that he wouldn't be able to withstand Qin Hao's merciless feat if he didn't increase his cultivation. He had no choice but to sacrifice his personal honor for the sake of the Dao Repository Hall's dignity. Yu Hui is a sensible junior brother. Shermu's heartstrings finally relaxed, and a smile returned to his face. However, his smile froze in the next moment. Shermu's face was incomparably twisted. Power of the 9 palaces, open. A thunderous roar shook the air. Incomparably dazzling light pierced through Qin Hao's ankles. Although his aura didn't change, his feet seemed to have turned into 2 demonic mountains. They were majestic and unshakable, and the force of his descent was so great that even the air itself wailed as his feet flew through the air. Chapter 1443. A terrifying aura descended from the sky, forming a dazzling might of the great Dao above Qin Hao. It gathered the will of the heavens, seemingly capable of crushing everything in the world. Mizar Palace's battle method. Daoist Song was shocked. How is this possible? Shermu exclaimed in disbelief. Golden light pierced through his ankle, erupting with primordial power. It was the aura of Mizar Palace's imperial method, the Battle of the Nine Palaces against Dili. The Battle of the Nine Palaces against Dili was as famous as Empress was Holy Spirit art. Both methods were the strongest, fiercest, and most young imperial methods in the Divine Palace. One of them focused on attacking with vital energy. The other strengthened the physical body. When the body erupted with terrifying power, one soul could become a great emperor. These two techniques were the best of the best. In the mortal realm, they were infinitely close to the existence of divine-level techniques. Qin Hao had only been in the Divine Palace for 2 days. How could he have learned the Battle of the Nine Palaces against Dili? Sure Moon naturally didn't know that Qin Hao had learned it under a cliff in Fallen Emperor Bay. Qin Hao wasn't the only one who'd learned the Battle of the Nine Palaces against Dili. Zhou Wudao, Zheng Qingqi, Yao, Little Jiao, and several Nightnet Palace disciples, including Xiaohua, had all learned it. Everyone's cultivation speed was different due to their different talents. Qin Hao had opened 3 palaces in total. Meanwhile, Qin Hao was drawing on the power of 2 palaces and 2 souls. His aura was so strong that he wasn't any weaker than the 8th level Emperor Realm Yuhui. Fire countered metal, so he had a slight advantage in terms of attributes. It was enough to win this battle. 2 soul spears, one black and one white, pierced forward with unparalleled sharpness. Qin Hao's feet were enveloped in demon fiend blood flames as he stepped on the black and white soul spears. The spear's shadows immediately weakened as they sank into the flames. When they came into contact with Qin Hao's feet, there was a deafening clang. It was as if they collided with refined steel, indestructible. His feet were indestructible. The 2 spears' souls shattered in midair. His body, Shenhua smiled helplessly. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to take advantage of Qin Hao even if he suppressed his cultivation. Even if Yuhui lost, it wouldn't be an injustice. I originally had no intention of competing. Why do you keep forcing me? Just admit defeat. After shattering Yu Hui's soul, Qin Hao's imposing golden body, which was wreathed in blood-colored devilish flames, descended from the sky. Yu Hui's eyes were bloodshot as he fell into a state of extreme nervousness. He crossed his arms and tried to block this world-shaking attack. Rumble. Qin Hao's foot stomped down like a demonic mountain. A storm of gold and blood stirred up in the training hall. The ground cracked and a sea of fire swept out. Yu Hui's body sank. That stomp had crushed his opponent several meters deep, leaving gullies in all directions. Still not admitting defeat, Qin Hao said. His black hair danced in the wind as he looked down on Yu Hui. His scarlet eyes were terrifying. At this moment, Yu Hui was bleeding profusely from the corner of his mouth. His body was trembling violently. He had suffered serious internal injuries. However, his arms were trembling as he tried to resist, and he still did not open his mouth to admit defeat. Is this the top genius of this year's candidates? I, Yu Hui, have been in the Divine Palace for 700 years. I've cultivated to the peak of the Emperor realm, but I'm still stuck below the Emperor's path. My senior brothers have caught up with me, and even the junior brothers who just joined the sect are inferior to me. Haha, Qin Hao, you're right. Talent is indeed the most important thing for a cultivator. However, I still want to try again. Yu Hui roared hoarsely. All the emotions he had suppressed for a long time erupted as his cultivation level underwent a 3rd transformation. This time, he completely unleashed his cultivation. 9th level Emperor Realm. For someone who had been in the Divine Palace for 700 years and had yet to step onto the Emperor's path, Yu Hui's 9th level Emperor Realm cultivation was incomparable to those in the Divine Palace at the same level as him, let alone those at the peak of the Emperor Realm in the outside world. His 9th level was the true limit, the limit below the Emperor Realm. Even if Xianyuan Wuying were here, he wouldn't dare say that he could defeat Yu Hui. Dazzling golden light gushed out in an instant, sweeping out like a hurricane of soul power. Daozong Peak trembled when Yu Hui's soul power was unleashed. A cultivator at the peak of the Emperor Realm was perhaps only a sliver of an opportunity to break through to the true Emperor Realm. Once they comprehended it, they might be able to step into the Emperor realm with a single thought. Qin Hao was fighting against a quasi-emperor. It was extremely dangerous. At this moment, strange phenomena rolled in the void. Winds and clouds surged, and the light of catastrophe grew brighter and brighter. It was as if countless cracks had appeared in the sky. Between heaven and earth, an obscure emperor's will wandered and spread, enveloping the 6 peaks of the divine palace. All the emperor-level cultivators on the 6 peaks could feel the terrifying eruption of power from Daozong Peak, Dili. Emperor's will. Yu Hui's power became incomparably vast. His arms shook with extremely intense golden light. His upright figure bathed in the light, and sharp soul spears densely packed around him. He was like the reincarnation of the spear god, commanding the world. Puffed. Qin Hao's chest tightened. The golden light entered his body and stirred up his organs. A trace of blood flowed from his mouth, and the soles of his feet seemed to split open. He was instantly sent flying. The power of Emperor's will. Qin Hao floated in the air and looked at Yu Hui. Dazzling light flowed around Yu Hui's body. His swaying vital qi almost materialized. His aura was terrifying. The training hall was enveloped by a layer of the will of the great Tao, and thousands of spear souls seemed to be buried in the space. This was the embryonic form of Emperor's will. Unfortunately, it was only an embryonic form. It hadn't formed the true power of laws yet. Even so, Qin Hao felt an indescribable pressure. Junior brother Qin, you're too strong. A mere second-level Emperor Realm cultivator has forced me to my limits. Yu Hui, have never been so miserable. It's very unfair to you, but I can't hold back. I want to see just how strong your talent is. This battle has nothing to do with victory or defeat. If you lose with pride. If I lose, I'll accept it wholeheartedly. Yui closed his eyes and raised his hand. His will enveloped the training hall, and he could control everything. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth surged madly towards him. Countless soul spears broke free from their forms. Barbed spikes shot into the sky like fish scales. They formed a dense array of spikes below. With just a thought, these countless soul spears could instantly shoot out and turn Qin Hao into a hedgehog. As he said, the outcome of this battle was no longer important. It had nothing to do with Daozong Peak and Migrez Peak. He only wanted the truth. Yu Hui wanted to see just how great the gap was between his talent and Qin Hao's. His heart that pursued the martial Tao had been completely touched by Qin Hao. Even if he lost, he would prostrate himself before him. Shermu, stop him. Xiao Han stepped out from the training hall and looked coldly at Shermu. How could he not see that all of this was because of Shermu? Now, Qin Hao was facing a quasi-emperor expert who truly possessed Emperor's will. This was no longer a simple spar. Even if Yu Hui's laws hadn't fully formed and might not be able to hold out for long, it was enough to pose a fatal threat to Qin Hao. Shermu glanced at Xiao Han. This newcomer actually called him by his name. Shermu smiled indifferently and ignored him. Master. Xiao Han looked nervously at Daozong. Don't worry, let them fight. Daozong responded. This seemingly dangerous battle couldn't cause any trouble in front of him, a peak master. Even if the 2 people below the stage had stepped into the second realm of the Emperor Dao, it wouldn't be difficult for Daozong to break their attacks, let alone Yu Hui whose laws had not matured yet. With him around, they would be safe. The frost on Xiao Han's face didn't melt because of this, but he felt more at ease. Since Daozong had promised, nothing would happen. However, in the training hall, the spectators' emotions were surging. This was too exciting. Qin Hao had forced Yu Hui to his limits. This was unbelievable to the older generation of students. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed it. Shou Wuk and the others were a little worried, but more than that, they wanted to see how Qin Hao would deal with a fake emperor expert. This battle was extremely helpful to both Qin Hao and Shou Wuk. Junior brother Qin, are you ready? Yu Hui asked. Bathed in golden light, his long hair turned golden. Even his eyes glowed with incomparably sharp golden light. He was incomparably wild and arrogant. Senior brother Yu, go easy on him. Qin Hao smiled. Of course, his heart was heavy to the extreme. Fortunately, Yu Hui hadn't stepped into the true Great Emperor realm, and his laws were still immature. He still had the strength to fight. Qin Hao wanted to see what would happen if his laws as a second-level Emperor realm cultivator went up against the immature laws of a fake emperor. Endless spear edge. Yu Hui clenched his fists. His majestic will of the great Tao mobilized countless spear souls. Sharp spears shot out from the ground. In this moment, he didn't need to gather chi. His will could act as a spear. Domain, strength of the dragon. Qin Hao's body trembled as the red lotus tyrannical flames swept out. The indestructible samsara art locked down the space around him. At the center of the space, his body expanded once again as a blinding golden light shone out. Along with the increase in his draconic might, his soul power and origin chi also increased unceasingly. Qin Hao's domain was very small. It only covered a 3-meter radius around him. If it expanded any further, the power would be insufficient and weaken the domain to a certain extent. Yu Hui's spear souls were too sharp. Strengthened by his will of the great emperor, his spear souls were almost limitless. He could hold on for a moment, but how long could he last? After all, this was the power of endless laws. As long as Yu Hui didn't die and his spirit wasn't exhausted, it would never end. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Countless spears descended and fell into the domain. They rubbed against the red lotus tyrannical fire and weakened the domain's momentum. However, the weakening was already very small. With the support of laws, Qin Hao's spear souls were limitless. Whenever he willed it, a spear would immediately pierce out in front of Qin Hao, ignoring the domain's restrictions. However, within this 3-meter space, no matter how fast Yu Hui's spear was, there was still resistance. This played a very important role. It was enough to buy time for Qin Hao. The rolling power of the dragon bloomed and merged into the red lotus tyrannical fire. The red lotus fire was immediately infected by the golden radiance. The blood-colored demonic flames turned into a sacred blaze. It looked very strange and out of place. However, the power of the blazing dragon Red Lotus at this time was terrifying. When countless spear souls pierced out and were restrained by the domain, the spear souls began to melt quickly. Before they reached Qin Hao, they disappeared one after another, as if they had merged into Qin Hao's body. The scene that the people outside saw was even more intense. The soul spears that blotted out the sky shot out. Qin Hao's body was constantly surrounded by golden light, forming a dense firepower attack. The attack was like a rainstorm. It was very visually shocking. However, Yu Hui's laws were limitless, so were his spears. Even though Qin Hao could block them for a while, he could hold on in time. This was what worried Zhou Wuk and Zhou Wudao the most. Junior brother Qin, you are indeed very strong, but I can see that this is indeed your limit. You can barely take on my spear souls. However, according to your explosive state, this kind of consumption is quite a heavy burden on you. I don't know if there will be any sequelae, but I advise you to admit defeat. No matter what, you can't hold on longer than me. Yu Hui looked at Qin Hao in the air and spoke frankly. Chapter 1444. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio Yu Hui was defeated. In the training ground, Qin Hao floated in the air. The blazing dragon Red Lotus wrapped around his body, bursting with dazzling light. Countless spear souls pierced toward him, but the dense golden spear shadows were blocked by the blazing dragon Red Lotus, unable to hit their target. However, this situation placed a heavy burden on Qin Hao. He couldn't maintain the eruption of dragon power for too long. It was the same for Yu Hui. His emperor will was immature, and his power couldn't compare to that of a true emperor. Forcefully using it would consume a lot of energy. Now, it was a matter of who would be the first to give up. Once Qin Hao's dragon power weakened, even if it was just a little bit weaker, the endless spear souls would instantly break through. However, if Qin Hao persisted, even if the two ended in a draw, the one who would fall would definitely be Yu Hui. He would be worn down by his own immature laws. For a time, the battle was in a deadlock. No one could do anything to the other. One was defending with all his strength, the other was attacking with all his might. However, Yu Hui believed that Qin Hao would be the first to give up before he fell. You're right. My eruption time is indeed very short. However, senior brother Yu, don't be blindly confident. My methods are far more than this. Qin Hao let out a low roar. In an instant, the water around his body surged. Strands of pure nether tranquil water energy flooded his meridians, quickly restoring his soul power and yuan qi. The energy was like a sweet spring that nourished his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. It was endless, greatly reducing the consumption of his body. In the training ground, as the third soul opened, everyone felt an incomparably powerful life aura descend. The power enveloped Qin Hao, stabilizing his explosive momentum. It seemed that he hadn't used up much energy in the repeated exchanges with Yu Hui. Water soul. Dao Zong's eyes widened. His beard fluttered a few times. Moreover, it wasn't an ordinary water soul. It had an extremely strong recovery ability. If it was just this, Dao Zong wouldn't be so angry. He was shocked that the recovery of this water soul could keep up with the consumption of the red lotus tyrannical fire. What did this prove? It proved that the two were of the same level. Qin Hao's water soul was no weaker than the second on the deviant flame list. Master, do you remember that there is a type of water in this world? Rumor has it that its power can bring the dead back to life and regrow flesh and blood. Shenghua asked. I do. It's the nether cleansing water that was born in the crevices of the nether realm. Of course, the rumors are a bit exaggerated. However, as long as a cultivator still has a breath left in him, he can drink a drop of it and recover to his peak state in half a day, Taoist scripture said solemnly. There is only one kind of water soul that could match the burning power of the red lotus fire. It was impossible to find a second one in the mortal world. Qin Hao had 3 kinds of top-grade source spirits, and the most inconceivable thing was that he could coexist the red lotus tyrannical flame and the nether purifying water in his body. He could be called a genius, a monster. These 2 types of source spirits were 2 extremes. Naturally, the Taoist scripture didn't know that a divine-level technique was enough to suppress the red lotus tyrannical fire and the nether cleansing water. Not only would they not counter each other, they could even complement each other. Because Qin Hao's body was strong enough. Yu Hui, use your ultimate move. Shimu roared. Source Soul Fusion Technique. Yu Hui's expression was extremely solemn. Even though he hadn't heard the conversation between his senior brother and master, the surging vitality of Qin Hao's nether cleansing water was enough for him to recognize that he would fall before Qin Hao if they continued to compete. Therefore, he couldn't let the stalemate continue. He had to kill his opponent in one blow. It's finally here. Showuk opened his eyes for the second time. He knew that Yu Hui would merge with the 2 spear souls and push him to the limits of his limits. After this attack, the curtains would be drawn on the battle. Brother-in-law, you have to hold on, Kair whispered softly. Xiaoer called out softly. He was only at the 2nd level of the Emperor realm, yet he was able to fight against an existence below the Emperor realm from the Divine Palace, who possessed the will of a half-emperor. World-punishing spear. 2 rays of light shot out from Yu Hui's eyes, one black and one white. They were incomparably dazzling, like 2 divine spears shooting out from his eyes. The power of laws flourished in the training field. The will of the great Tao combined with the black and white rays of light to form a dazzling Taiji diagram above Yu Hui's head. The 2 rays of light flowed into the diagram and revolved according to the Taiji path. They gradually merged into one and turned into an incomparably dazzling divine spear. Black and white intersected in this spear. The 2 colors twisted together and spread from the end of the spear to the tip, exuding an extremely terrifying aura of destruction. Then, a deafening roar of momentum swept out. The black and white divine spear stirred up a storm as it pierced toward Qin Hao. Its momentum was terrifying to the extreme. This spear not only merged with the will of the two spear souls, but also Yu Hui's laws. His laws were endless. Unless his opponent's martial will crushed Yu Hui's will, there was no technique or weapon that could destroy this spear. In other words, it was immortal and indestructible until it killed its opponent. "I've been waiting for you," Qin Hao roared. The blazing dragon red lotus became turbulent and torrential. His entire person turned into a furnace and actually incinerated all the spear souls around him. Qin Hao roared in his heart, "Law, tear." Yu Hui relied on his own strength to unleash a soul essence fusion technique that could only be used by two people. This spear also contained endless laws. Din naturally knew that it could not be destroyed. However, just because the world could not do it, it did not mean that Qin Hao could not. The Emperor Realm gave birth to Tao Intent. It gathered the momentum of heaven and earth, evolved the laws, and suppressed all life. However, under the power of laws, the laws were ineffective. The God Realm was above all living beings. This spear could destroy Qin Hao. An incomparably profound power descended. It was as if a ray of light shot from another world and bathed Qin Hao's body. At this moment, the disciples of Daozong Peak once again felt the aura of the collapse of fallen Emperor Bei's cliff. However, without the support of the array, Qin Hao's tiny divine power contained in the law could not be magnified. Therefore, the scene of all things losing color did not appear in front of everyone's eyes. Even so, when Qin Hao released his aura, everyone felt as if their souls were being controlled. They were completely helpless. In the void, a loud dragon roar sounded. The sea of clouds churned as if a huge cloud dragon flew out from the clouds. At this moment, Qin Hao's figure was a little blurry. Everyone could not see it clearly. They could only vaguely see a white shadow flickering on the surface of Qin Hao's body. It was as if there was another soul hidden in his body. Qin Hao was replaced by another soul. His entire temperament changed greatly. His aura became unfamiliar, even to Xiaohan. The red lotus fire was completely extinguished. In its place, Qin Hao's body surged with endless sharpness. He emitted a spear intent that was even more terrifying than Yu Hui's. It was as if he was the incarnation of the Spear Emperor. At this moment, Qin Hao's lips curled into a mocking sneer. It was as if he was mocking Yu Hui's spear. Then, he raised his right hand. With a single movement, it was as if his will covered the sky. Above the void, a sharp whirlwind blew. The whirlwind blew away the clouds. A resplendent spear light appeared, and a dragon roared in the sky. The spear light swooped down like a cloud dragon descending into the world. It roared as it rushed towards the black and white spear shadows. The two shadows were incomparably turbulent, constantly approaching each other. Their speed was so fast that even before the sound could be heard, time seemed to stop. Everyone watched numbly as the black and white spear light disappeared in the sky. A blurry cloud dragon spear shadow descended and pierced through Yu Hui's body. A fountain of blood spurted out. Yu Hui's hair was disheveled. He spread out his arms and leaned back. Then, he slowly fell to the ground. Cloud Dragon Seed Earner, mission accomplished. Qin Hao smiled frivolously. His eyes flashed, and the will of the sovereign retreated. His face regained its usual cold and arrogant expression. Chapter 1445. This spear was performed by the Dragon Spirit Dharma form, and Qin Hao was no match for the Dragon Spirit. Just now, his consciousness retreated, and the Dragon Spirit temporarily took control of the body. He used the East Continent Spear Emperor's unique skill to tear apart Yu Hui's fusion technique, and defeated him while he was exhausted. Emperor-grade spear technique. Daozong muttered. Qin Hao also knew the way of the spear. This spear was quite exquisite, and his technique was remarkable. Junior brother Yu, good fortune has descended upon you. You've obtained this good fortune. Shenghua smiled. Below the stage, there was dead silence. Every single disciple was stunned. Yu Hui was defeated. He was defeated by a new disciple who had just entered the Divine Palace 2 days ago. How shocking! Among the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace, except for the disciples that the peak masters were most proud of, Yu Hui's strength could be ranked among the top of the 7 peaks. However, he was defeated by Qin Hao. Yu Hui was a quasi-emperor who had comprehended the personal emperor will rules. How could it be? Feng Qianli clenched his fists and trembled. Although he knew that Qin Hao was stronger than him, he still refused to admit it. It just so happened that the peak master was teaching, and Qin Hao came uninvited. He wanted to see him make a fool of himself, but unexpectedly, Yu Hui was defeated after a hard battle. A quasi-emperor was really a good-for-nothing. After this battle, Qin Hao's reputation in the Divine Palace would soar. A new disciple defeated a senior brother of the previous batch. How impressive! Far away, Yu Qianyang of the Fierce Sun Temple, who used to be the leader of the southern region, was now full of loneliness. Back then, he sat in the attic and looked down on Qin Hao as an ant, as the powerful son of the sect. Now, step by step, Qin Hao's cultivation was strong enough to fight with a senior brother of Daozong Peak from the upper world and defeat him. Yu Qianyang did not even have the courage to fight. At that time, he ordered Qin Hao around, and now he was so weak that he was not qualified to be Qin Hao's opponent. How sad. This was probably how Changhe Lo used to feel. How dare you? Suddenly, a loud roar reverberated from the podium. Following that, a vast emperor's will surged in the training field. The powerful 9-star emperor's will raged violently. In the void, an unparalleled pressure was born. The disciples were shocked to see a dazzling giant hand pressing down on Qin Hao. "Shimu, what are you doing?" Sheng Hua shouted in shock. Rumble. The handprint slammed down, causing the ground of the training ground to sink. Endless dust was kicked up into the air. This scene caught everyone off guard. The 1,000 or so Daozong Peak disciples subconsciously looked toward the top of the rostrum. Below perfected cultivator Daozong, there was a cold-looking young man with a straight face. He stretched out his right hand and pressed it down expressionlessly. His body was flashing with a terrifying platinum aura. The dilly aura he exuded was terrifying. It was Shimu, Daozong Peak's lead disciple. Sheng Hua was the second most powerful person in the sect. Shimu, Xiao Han let out a roar and released his crown origin spirit. His aura became extremely sacred and inviolable. At this moment, Xiao Han was not the only one. Ke-Er, Zhou Wudao, Shou Wuk, Zheng Qingqi, and many other new disciples released their origin spirits at the same time. The training field was filled with colorful lights. It was extremely dazzling. Tao Tai roared, the lotus sword will bloomed, and the shadow of a peacock hovered in the air. All of them were extremely angry. There was even a hint of killing intent in their aura. Let go. Shou Wuk's eyes were cold. Wisps of sword will flowed around his body. The world was filled with incomparably sharp sword chi. Xiao Han, don't be rash. Qin Hao's voice was heard. As the dust gradually dispersed, a trembling figure appeared in front of everyone. Qin Hao's clothes were torn, and his hands were supporting the sky. His usual upright posture became heavy and bent under the pressure of the vast emperor's will. Although he didn't know why Shimu did this, Qin Hao knew that even if everyone worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat Shimu. If Shimu really wanted to kill him, no one could stop him. Of course, on Daozong Peak, in front of perfected Lord Daozong, Shimu would not dare to kill him even if he had the guts of a bear. Qin Hao just didn't want to see Xiao Han and the others get hurt. Senior brother Shimu, did I offend you? Qin Hao forced a smile. However, his hands were suppressing Dilly so heavily that his bones were groaning in pain. How dare you talk so much? You injured Yu Hui, and your actions are so vicious. If it weren't for your identity, do you think you would still be able to speak in front of me? Good morning, Shimu said coldly. He could turn Qin Hao into a bloody pulp with just a thought. Shimu, you've gone too far. Look at Yu Hui's situation first. Sheng Hua scolded sternly. Everyone's gaze fell on the injured Yu Hui. They saw that Yu Hui's body, which had been lying on the ground, was now sitting cross-legged. Although he looked terrible, his body was flowing with the radiance of the spear will, and the emperor's will didn't dissipate. On the contrary, it was gradually becoming stronger. It seemed that he had been enlightened and was in a state of enlightenment. He was guarding his mind and grasping the opportunity to gain enlightenment. Junior brother Qin used a profound spear technique to enter Yu Hui's body. When the spear was about to hit him, it dissipated in time. He was helping Yu Hui enter the emperor's path and apologizing to junior brother Qin. Shenghua pointed at Yu Hui, who had his eyes closed, and said to Shi Mu sternly. Even he could see Qin Hao's intention with this spear. Shi Mu was also a great emperor. How could he not see it? However, Shenghua knew that Yu Hui had lost. Shi Mu chose to attack, not because of Yu Hui's defeat, but because of Daozong Peak. It was indeed a shameful thing for an older disciple to be defeated by a younger disciple. It was fine if Yu Hui was weak, but what about the dignity of Daozong Peak? Shenghua didn't say it out loud, because he wanted to give Shi Mu face and give him a way out. Senior brother Shi Mu, senior brother, you has been stuck at the fake emperor realm for many years. His cultivation level is actually high enough to enter the emperor realm. Perhaps he is still a little confused about the spear Dao. Just now, I let him experience the emperor spear technique of an old senior. I hope it can help senior brother you break through his mental state. I didn't injure him, Qin Hao said. The dragon spirit could defeat Yu Hui with the tearing law. Qin Hao could naturally do the same. He chose to use the cloud dragon sea turner spear technique to help Yu Hui enter the emperor realm. Shi Mu, did you hear that? Daozong said with a gloomy face. How could someone who had entered the great emperor realm still be unable to let go of the knot in his heart? It was one thing for him to be unable to let go of the grudge he had with the eastern sky, but for no reason, he had implicated that little fellow Qin Hao. I see. I have wronged junior brother Qin. However, I have to admit that you are indeed very talented. Why don't we exchange some pointers? Don't worry, I won't make a move. You just have to endure my emperor's will for half an hour. When that time comes, I will win. It will also prove that you are very talented. Shi Mu's cold expression changed, and a smile appeared on his face. However, even though he pretended to admit his mistake, he didn't mean to apologize at all. On the contrary, he had an aggressive aura. Even if Qin Hao didn't want to, he had to. Chapter 1446. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio making a ruckus. No one had expected that Shi Mu would ask Qin Hao to spar with him. Yu Hui's ability was already extraordinary, and Qin Hao had a hard time winning. It was enough to prove his talent. But no matter what, he was no match for Shi Mu. As the top genius of the previous generation, Shi Mu's talent was rare in the Seven Peaks. Below Shenghua of Daozong Peak, no one dared to fight him, including the older disciples. He was a 9-star great emperor, and even 100 of Yu Hui's false laws couldn't compare to Shi Mu's. He didn't even need to use any techniques, let alone rules. He could crush Qin Hao with his emperor's will alone. After all, Qin Hao had just entered the emperor realm. The gap between the two was huge. Qin Hao was in for a treat. Feng Qianli sneered. Feng Qianli let out a cold laugh. This change had come too suddenly. Shi Mu seemed to have lowered his status, but in reality, he had the intention of bullying Qin Hao. Qin Hao had humiliated Daozong Peak, so how could second brother let him off so easily? He would definitely trample on Qin Hao. No matter how strong Qin Hao was, could he be stronger than Shi Mu? I admit defeat, Qin Hao replied decisively. He was confident that he could fight a 9-star great emperor as a second-level emperor realm cultivator, but he wasn't crazy. Shi Mu's cultivation was second only to Shenghua, which meant that he might be on par with second senior brother Chanyu of Migres Peak. It was very likely that he had also entered the third realm of emperor realm, which was Qin Hao's peak state in his previous life. Moreover, the people of the Divine Palace had a stronger foundation than the great emperors of the outside world. I admit that I'm no match for senior brother Shi Mu. I admit defeat. Please disperse the seal. Qin Hao smiled bitterly. There was no point in exposing his emperor's spirit. There was nothing to hide in the Divine Palace. However, Even if it was like Coiling Dragon Peak, where Qin Hao's spirit was on the verge of collapse, it wouldn't be a threat to Shermu. It was fine to bully the emperors of the outside world. As long as it was unexpected, it would have a certain effect. Against Shermu of the Divine Palace, any struggle would be useless. I admit defeat. This was the first time Zhou Wudao heard an opponent he admired lower his head to someone else. Zhou Wu's expression changed slightly. Qin Hao was such a prideful person. He must be very uncomfortable to be forced to admit defeat. However, he was forced by the circumstances, and his opponent was Shermu of Daozong Peak. He had no choice but to do so. Don't be so humble, junior brother Qin. Or do you look down on me and think that I'm not worthy to be your opponent? Shermu's smile faded, and the emperor's will in his palm grew stronger. That's not what I meant, Qin Hao explained. The pressure continued to increase. If that's not what I meant, then take my emperor's will, Shermu said sharply. Ha. As the direct disciple of Migre's temple, Qin Hao, aren't you talented? If you can't even withstand half a minute of Brother Priest Emperor's will, then don't talk about talent with others in the future. It's so embarrassing. Feng Qianli laughed. A little test? If you have the ability, go and carry it. Zhou Wudao roared. You? Feng Qianli frowned. Uncle Master. Qin Hao's feet were sinking into the ground. The pressure on him was getting stronger and stronger. His body was trembling more and more violently. Although he was not seriously injured after fighting with Yu Hui, his spirit could not withstand Yu Hui's torment. Lord Daozong closed his eyes and looked like an old monk in meditation. He did not order Shermu to stop because of Qin Hao's call. Beside him, Shenghua sighed. Qin Hao could not avoid it. Senior sister, are you just going to watch me get bullied like this? Qin Hao shouted in a certain direction. His forehead was sweating profusely, and his eyes were misty. The terrifying emperor's will invaded his mind. His spirit felt like it was being torn apart. His breathing was rapid, and his veins were bulging. His heart was also trembling violently. The only person left who could save him was Senior Sister. Only Senior Sister had the ability to fight against Shermu. Although he had never greeted her, they had met at least twice. They were cultivating on the same peak. Senior Sister would not stand by and do nothing. In fact, Qin Hao was wrong. He was not standing by and doing nothing. The moment he looked over, he saw a beautiful figure standing in a corner far away from the periphery of the training hall. A look of shock flashed across her delicate face. When the woman and Qin Hao looked at each other, it was like a thief who had been discovered and fled in a panic. Her movement technique was extremely fast. She disappeared in an instant, as if she had never appeared. Senior Sister? Perfected Lord Daozong's soul seemed to have been struck by lightning. His body trembled as he opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the voice. He realized that Qin Hao was looking at a green shirt tree. There was no one there. Shenghua and the other elders were in the same situation as Lord Daozong. Their souls trembled and they looked over at the same time. However, the result was the same as Lord Daozong. There was no one. Qin Hao, you are so anxious that you can't even speak coherently. How helpless are you, Senior Sister? Feng Qianli mocked. Wasn't he very impressive just now when he defeated the useless Yu Hui? Why did he become a trembling dog in front of Senior Brother Shermu? Buzz. The void trembled as the incomparably tyrannical Great Dao Dili pressed down. A giant palm that enveloped the world of the training hall crushed down inch by inch. The raging platinum light ground down on Qin Hao's body until the dragon scales on his body fell off. No matter how hard the tranquil water tried to repair them, it could not keep up with the speed of the 9-star Great Emperor's destruction. Shermu, stop, Shenghua said. Qin Hao had reached the limit of his limit. There was no way he could hold on for more than half a quarter of an hour. At this time, as long as he relaxed his mind, there could be extremely serious consequences. The price for Qin Hao would be an incalculable injury. Stop? Why should I stop? Shermu's expression was extremely cold. The disciples of Migre's palace listened to teachings on the 6 peaks. This is the rule of the divine palace. Didn't Eastern Sky and Chanyu go through it? Only those who have been tempered by the will of the Six Peaks are worthy of being a disciple of Migre's palace. Since I am the senior brother of Daozong Peak, it is my duty to train the new disciple of Migre's palace and let him experience the will of the great Emperor Realm in advance. When Mu finished speaking, the light in his palm exploded and a majestic pressure swept out. Qin Hao's body gradually oozed blood, and his body bent more and more as if he was going to lie on the ground. Mu, you are playing with fire. If Eastern Sky comes here, do you know what the consequences will be? Shenghua warned. It's none of your business. The mention of Eastern Sky seemed to have touched a thorn in Mu's heart. He suddenly burst out, and the will of the Emperor in his palm grew stronger. Seeing that Qin Hao's face was about to be stuck to the ground, Mu roared. Where is your talent? Where is your so-called talent? You are pressed down just like that. You are far worse than Eastern Sky. Get up. Bang! Mu stomped his feet on the ground, and a tyrannical force spread out, shaking Qin Hao's body. Before he could rise into the air, Mu's palm pressed down again. Puff! With this blow, a dent appeared on Qin Hao's back, and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were blood red, as if there were two balls of blood burning in his eyes. The angry roar of a dragon circled the space. Withstanding the unimaginable pressure, Qin Hao's bent body straightened up bit by bit, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. I don't know why you are targeting me, but if you want to try, then let's do it. I don't care if I become ashes or mud. I am Qin Hao, and I hope senior brother Mu will teach me. Qin Hao said in a hoarse voice. Demonic flames appeared on his blood-stained body again, and it was like an undying flame, fighting against Mu. Above Qin Hao's head, a huge dragon Dharma body shrouded, exuding a rolling dragon's aura. Limit? No. He still had the Golden Bell protection, the two precepts that he inherited from the martial lord and the dragon spirit Dharma form. Perhaps the Golden Bell protection was weak and could only last for a moment. Although his meteorite precepts and burning precepts could not exert the true power of the will of the way, because he had not reached the Emperor realm. But if Mu wanted to mess with Qin Hao, he would have to pay a price. Ha, good, very good. That's more like a disciple of the Migre's palace. But I don't know if you have the ability to be so arrogant. Mu's eyes were sharp, and an unparalleled pressure rushed toward Qin Hao's position with his palm. The sound of space shattering came from the training hall, and it was shattered by Mu's endless Emperor will. Waves of air swirled around, causing the heaven and earth to resonate. The sky darkened as if the distance between it and the ground was shortened. A powerful force descended from the sky, and Mu dominated this part of the world. Then, this force blasted toward Qin Hao's back. He wanted to see how strong Qin Hao's backbone was. Mu, stop it. Shenhua was really angry this time. Boom! A fierce palm print came down with the force of heaven and earth. An endless platinum flame raged in the smoke. As soon as Shenhua spoke, the palm print crushed Qin Hao's body. At this moment, the minds of the thousands of disciples in the training hall went blank. Mu had really hit Qin Hao hard. Judging by the power of this palm, Qin Hao had no chance of survival. Even Feng Qianli did not expect Mu to be so ruthless. Zhou Wu Dao and the others were completely dumbfounded. The second seed of the Daozong Peak is just SOSO. While they were stunned, a disdainful voice came from the place where Mu had attacked. Just as Xiao Han and the others were about to fight Mu to the death, this sentence stopped them in their tracks. As the smoke dissipated, three figures appeared where Qin Hao had been standing. One of them was a young man in his early 20s, with white hair and a youthful face. He wore a purple robe and a laurel crown on his head, and his whole body was full of immortal qi. The other figure was an old man with long hair and a face full of wrinkles. He wore shabby cotton clothes with an inconspicuous gray rope around his waist. The third figure was naturally Qin Hao. However, to everyone's surprise, Qin Hao was actually completely unharmed. Not to mention that terrifying palm strike from before, even the external injuries that Mu's emperors will had completely healed. In an instant, the atmosphere became a little suffocating. All the disciples of the Daozong Peak stared at the young man and the old man. They felt that these two were incomparably powerful. At this moment, Eastern Sky stood in front of Qin Hao. Old Changyu stood beside Qin Hao with one hand on his shoulder, while the other hand was fiddling with the sparkling and translucent pills. "Junior brother, eat it. I just came from Taiwei Peak and took these Emperor Realm Qi build-up pills from Marshal Uncle Taiwei. He just made them, so they're still warm." Old Changyu's hand was full of Emperor Realm Qi build-up pills as he spoke, and he slapped them all into Qin Hao's mouth. "You're too weak. Eat more. They're just bullying you because you're weak. Otherwise, why didn't they come to Migres Peak to spar with me and senior brother?" At this moment, 3 empty bottles had been thrown to the ground at Changyu's feet. This, Zhou Wudao was dumbfounded. The Emperor Realm Qi build-up pill was a precious pill that promoted the advancement of Emperor Realm. The disciples of the Daozong Peak were only given 1 pill a month. Second-class disciples had 3. Personal disciples like Shou Wuk, Xiao Han, and Zhou Wudao only had 5. That old man had fed Qin Hao 3 bottles in the blink of an eye. Did the people of Migres Hall eat that? At this moment, Zhou Wudao was in a bad mood. He felt that he shouldn't worry about Qin Hao blindly. He should even let Qin Hao suffer more in Shermu's hands. First Flawless had the same thought. Senior brother. Qin Hao chuckled. Fortunately, they'd arrived in time. Otherwise, that palm, Eastern Sky. Shermu's eyes shone with a piercing light as he stared at the young man below him. Had Eastern Sky resolved his Emperor's suppression so easily? "Shermu, your temper has gotten worse over the past 100 years, but your cultivation hasn't improved." Changyu smiled at the lectern. "It's not Eastern Sky, it's you." Shermu's eyes widened. The person who'd resolved the Emperor's suppression for Qin Hao wasn't Eastern Sky, but Changyu. "Senior uncle." Eastern Sky ignored everyone and bowed slightly. He cupped his hands in salute at Daozong Peak. "Eastern Sky, I haven't seen you in decades. What brings you to Daozong Peak today?" Lord Daozong finally opened his eyes and smiled. "Your Daozong Peak is a bit chaotic," Eastern Sky said. "They're all young and impetuous juniors." "Let them be," Daozong Peak said nonchalantly. "Let them be." Eastern Sky looked at Shermu and said, "All right, I haven't come to Daozong Peak for decades. Today, I'll be the one to cause trouble." Chapter 1447. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio, you can't mess with my junior brother. The Divine Palace's 7 peaks had different ways of cultivating the Emperor's path. Under normal circumstances, the disciples of each peak rarely moved around unless there was an occasion to worship their ancestors, celebrate the anniversary, or the inauguration ceremony of a new palace master. Although the people of Migres Peak were not bound by the palace rules, they did not often wander around the peaks. When one reached the level of Eastern Sky and Changyu, they spent more time cultivating and pursuing the existence above the Emperor Realm. Unless they encountered difficulties in their cultivation that they could not solve, they would choose to go to a peak to seek guidance. As for Eastern Sky, he had not been to the repository palace for decades. If it were not for Qin Hao, he and Changyu would not have gone to Taiwei Peak to get the elixir from Taiwei Perfected Lord. Today, the Emperor's will of the Daozong Peak swept over. When Yu Hui fought with Qin Hao, he activated the fake Emperor's will, which had already attracted Eastern Sky's attention. When Shermu's aura bloomed and the Emperor's will raged, Eastern Sky and Changyu immediately rushed over. What they saw was that Qin Hao was being bullied by Shermu. "Eastern Sky, Shermu has a childish temper. Don't lower yourself to his level." Shenghua's forehead was covered in sweat. "Shenghua, children have a bad temper. As his senior brother, I have to guide him and correct his mistakes. As the chief disciple of the repository palace, if you can't do it, I will do it for you. Since Uncle also said that he can cause trouble, you don't have to care about this matter." Eastern Sky stared at Shermu. Wisps of Emperor's light flowed on his purple robe. "Others may be afraid of you, but I'm not. Come on, Eastern Sky, Shermu roared. Platinum flames rolled around his body as his great emperor cultivation erupted. Bang! A void hand grasped out, and Dong Tian gathered his emperor's power and grabbed at Shermu with a raging radiance. With a grasp, the platinum aura was destroyed. Even Shermu's flowing emperor's will was easily crushed by Dong Tian. In the next moment, everyone was shocked to see Shermu fall from the platform and crash into the training hall. "How'd he hurt you?" Eastern Sky asked Qin Hao. "He hit me from behind and let me suffer his emperor's will for half an hour." Qin Hao rubbed his back. It was still hurting. "Qian Kuan, Sun, Zhen Kan Li Jin," the Eastern Sky recited silently. Lines of platinum characters flew out of his mouth and gathered between heaven and earth. In the void, streaks of unparalleled power quickly converged. Everyone saw a gigantic 8 trigrams diagram appear in the sky, flowing with dazzling emperor will. At this moment, Shermu's will that had shrouded the world vanished and was completely replaced by the boundless power of the 8 trigrams. As Eastern Sky spat out the last word, suppress, the resplendent pattern, which seemed to have sucked up all the energy in the world, emitted a rumbling sound and smashed down on Shermu, who had fallen into the training hall. Before he could stand up, the pattern had already pressed him to the ground. "Let's go," Chang Yu said, grabbing Qin Hao by the shoulder and flying away from Daozong Peak, hovering far away in the void. "Let's go." Perfected Lord Daozong immediately got up from his seat and left without saying a word. He also hovered far away in the void, not forgetting to send a voice transmission to Shanghua. "Take all your junior brothers and sisters with you." The few elders of Daozong Peak were not any slower than perfected Lord Daozong. "What's going on?" someone asked. "Why did Peak Venerable Daozong run?" A wave of platinum aura swept over. Shanghua lifted his sleeve and swept up nearly 1,000 disciples in the hall. They all left, including Yu Hui, who was in an epiphany. In the next second, the people who had stopped in the void understood why they had to leave Daozong Peak. They had no choice but to run. Countless gazes looked over and saw the massive 8 trigrams diagram pressing down. With just one blow, Daozong Peak had completely collapsed under this force. Then, everyone saw Shermu's body shoot out from the collapsed smoke and dust. He was completely, uncontrollably thrown into the air by an external force. However, a huge, dazzling emperor's palm appeared and suddenly slammed him back down. Shermu's shrill scream rang out between heaven and earth. "Where's your talent? Where's your emperor's precepts? It doesn't matter if you hate me, but you dare to vent your anger on my junior brother. Shermu, you made me unhappy again." Bang! Shermu's body was thrown into the air again. As the dazzling emperor's palm pressed down again, he was slammed back down again. Then a miserable figure bounced back and forth between the collapsed Daozong Peak and the 8 trigrams diagram. His speed was so fast that it was dazzling. At this moment, the disciples of Daozong Peak could no longer feel the majesty of their senior brother Shermu. What great emperor realm! What emperor's precepts! What Daozong Peak's number 2? In front of the 8 trigrams diagram and the void palm, Shermu was as weak as a baby. Strong. Too strong. Eastern Sky's beating a Shermu was like an adult beating a child. It was unbearable to watch. Shermu was unable to resist at all. They're both great emperors, but the gap between them is too big. Is this the strength of the people of Migre's palace? Will Qin Hao become such a monster in a few years' time? Many disciples of Daozong Peak looked at Qin Hao with fear. Among them, more than a dozen young men from the Xinyuan family were filled with endless fear. Perhaps Qin Hao still needed some time to grow, but his senior brother was too terrifying. He was extremely protective of his disciples. Thinking of the resentment between the Xinyuan family and Qin Hao, if he dragged Eastern Sky out of the Divine Palace, the Xinyuan family of the southern region would have no chance of survival. Didn't he hit him a little too hard? Qin Hao was also frightened. Dinda knew how strong Shermu was, but he was beaten like a child by Eastern Sky. Senior brother's temper has always been bad. All these years, he has been holding it in, Zhang Yu said. Qin Hao trembled. It turned out that the gentle person he saw on the first day he entered Migre's palace was just an illusion. From now on, he had to be more obedient when facing his senior brother Eastern Sky in Migre's palace. Eastern Sky is serious. Master, should we stop him? Shenghua asked. Do you want to do it? Or should I? Daozong rolled his eyes at Shenghua. If you do, how confident are you in defeating Eastern Sky? Well, Shenghua glanced at Daozong Peak and scanned Eastern Sky's aura with his emperor's will. He replied with difficulty, less than 40%? It's 30%. Sigh. Spirit Transformation Realm, Dao Condensation Realm, Eastern Sky is not far away. Daozong sighed helplessly. It was not that he did not want to stop him, but he was afraid that even if he did, he would not be able to stop him. Eastern Sky's current cultivation was not much weaker than the peak masters of the Seven Peaks. After all, he was the successor that Old Man Migres had painstakingly cultivated. If nothing unexpected happened, Eastern Sky would be the master of the Divine Palace in the future. Tianke and Shenghua were just peak masters who supported Eastern Sky. If there was anyone to blame, it was Shermu's own fault. Of all people, he had to provoke Eastern Sky's junior brother. Eastern Sky is the same. I told him not to cause trouble for the juniors, but Eastern Sky is not a junior. As the future successor of the Divine Palace, he had to get involved in a fight. Daozong closed his eyes mercilessly. Second disciple, you're on your own now. At this moment, Daozong Peak had completely collapsed. The figure bouncing back and forth between heaven and earth had already let out a hoarse cry for help. Master, save me. Senior brother, come and help me. The voice was miserable and helpless. I told you were playing with fire, but you didn't believe me. Shenghua closed his eyes. Chapter 1448. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Greeting, Gift Between Heaven and Earth. The 8 trigrams diagram shone brightly. Wisps of Emperor Dao flowed within it. Under its light, all the laws in the world were suppressed. Even the laws of the Emperor Dao were defeated. The powerful slap whistled. Shermu's cry for help was still very urgent at first, but it slowly became more and more hoarse. In less than a quarter of an hour, it was already so weak that it was almost inaudible. In the end, it was completely drowned out by the palm wind. A fierce battle between emperors naturally alarmed the powerhouses of the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace. Streaks of golden-white aura flew over and hovered above Daozong Peak. Every single one of them was a martial emperor. In an instant, the scene of Eastern Sky beating Shermu attracted dozens of emperors to watch. Among them were the elders of the various peaks, as well as the chief and second chief disciples of the various peaks. Shintian Peaks Tian K also arrived at the scene. However, when they saw that the person who attacked was Eastern Sky of the Migres Palace, none of the emperors present dared to step forward to stop him, let alone intervene. The figure bouncing back and forth finally stopped, but no one could feel Shermu's aura in the dust. As the dust gradually dissipated, the majestic Daozong Peak was raised to the ground by a terrifying force. In its original position, only a pitch-black sinkhole was left. In the sinkhole, there were 2 figures, one standing and one lying down. Eastern Sky's purple robe was spotless as he looked down calmly. As for Shermu, he was lying at Eastern Sky's feet with a bloody nose and a swollen face. His originally neat and tidy hall robe was also in tatters. After being beaten for a full quarter of an hour, his clothes were barely covering his body. Eastern Sky didn't leave any words. He calmly glanced at Shermu and flew away. Stepping in the void, he walked to Qin Hao. All the disciples of Daozong Peak along the made way for him. Each and every one of them had a look of awe on their faces. A quarter of an hour, no more, no less. Eastern Sky said calmly. He swung his palm and released his Emperor Dao. He didn't use the laws, so it wasn't considered bullying Shermu. It was just like how Shermu treated Qin Hao. Ahem, senior brother Shermu. Will he be all right? Qin Hao asked concernedly. Those who have cultivated to the Emperor realm have very strong bones. They'll be fine after lying down for a few months. Junior brother, you're so kind. It's easy to be taken advantage of like this. You have to change. Eastern Sky patted Qin Hao's shoulder and imparted him the way of life. The disciples of Daozong Peak felt a chill run down their spines when they heard this. How could a great emperor be fine after being beaten to the point of lying in bed for months? Oh, Dong Tian, look at your temper. You become as irritable as Shermu. Forget it, my training ground is finished today. Even the Dao Peak has been smashed by you. Since you've avenged Qin Hao, bring your men back to the Migrez Palace. Daoist Zong waved his hand helplessly. How can we let them go? Master, his cultivation is obviously much higher than senior brother Qin Hao's. Even if he avenged Qin Hao, he didn't have to be so vicious. This is clearly bullying. He even destroyed our Daozong Peak. We can't just let it go like this, Feng Qianli said timidly. After he finished speaking, he hid behind Shenhua. Bullying? You still have the cheek to talk about bullying? Zhou Wudao secretly glared at Feng Qianli. Uncle Master, it seems that the junior brother of Daozong Peak still doesn't want me to leave. Could it be that he wants to replace Shermu and take half a minute of my Emperor Dao suppression? Eastern Sky looked at Feng Qianli calmly. However, this pair of eyes made Feng Qianli so nervous that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It was as if his throat was being strangled. You talk too much. Daozong reprimanded Feng Qianli. Then he waved his sleeve at Eastern Sky and said, Take him back. I still have to busy myself with repairing the Daozong Peak. Eastern Sky bowed slightly to express his apology. Junior brother, I'm leaving. Oh, Qin Hao replied. He silently glanced at Xiao Han, winked, and followed behind Eastern Sky. Wait a minute, brother Qin Hao. Xiao Han caught up and tugged at the corner of Qin Hao's clothes. She looked as if she couldn't bear to part with him. Good girl. Learn the Emperor Dao well from Uncle Master Daozong. If there's anything you don't understand, ask senior brother Shenhua. Qin Hao smiled and pinched Xiao Han's face. How could he not see that after today's incident, she didn't want to stay in the Daozong Peak anymore? And this is... Eastern Sky, turn around. Oh, my younger sister, Xiao Han. Qin Hao scratched his head with a smile and gave Xiao Han a look. Xiao Han greets senior brother Eastern Sky and senior brother Changyu. Xiao Han bowed obediently. These two senior brothers were indeed good people. Younger sister? Eastern Sky smiled. Sister-in-law, right? Changyu, give us a greeting gift. Junior sister Xiao Han, this is our first meeting, so I didn't prepare anything. I just got some Emperor Realm Qi establishing pills from Taiwei Peak. I hope you don't think I'm stingy. Changyu chuckled and took out 2 bottles. Thank you, senior brother Changyu. Xiao Han accepted happily. You really don't treat me like an outsider, Qin Hao said. Xiao Han wasn't usually like this. Why would I treat you like an outsider? Xiao Han put away the 2 bottles of pills. Although she was true Lord Daozong's personal disciple, she only received 5 pills a month. Why was it so different from the treatment of Migrez Palace's disciples? Qin Hao seemed to have them whenever he wanted. Zhou Wudao became excited when he saw this. He exchanged glances with Shou Wuk, Zheng Qingqi, and the others. These fellows were like a group of cats that smelled fish. They all stepped forward in unison. Even Qian Ning of the Shuiyao Holy Nation came to join in the fun. Daozong Peak's Zhou Wudao greets senior brother Dong Tian and senior brother Changyu. Qin Hao and I have grown up together, and we've been through thick and thin together. Today, I'm truly in awe of the 2 senior brothers. Zheng Qingqi of Daozong Peak greets the 2 senior brothers. Qian Ning of Daozong Peak greets the 2 senior brothers. Senior brother Eastern Sky, you're so cool. I. Qian Ning blushed. The girl's admiration was self-evident. I'm Shou Wuk. First Wu Kei cupped his hands at the 2 of them with a righteous aura. He was neither servile nor overbearing. He first looked at Changyu before looking at Dong Tian and said seriously, Senior brother Dong Tian, I have something that I don't know if I should say. Junior brother Wuk, feel free to say it, Eastern Sky said. You're so handsome. Showuk's eyes were filled with passion. His expression was exactly the same as when Sayogwa first met Qin Hao. A bunch of shameless bootlickers. Feng Qianli was incomparably jealous. His heart was filled with longing, and how he wished he could also stand in front of Eastern Sky. Hee, are you all Qin Hao's friends? Eastern Sky asked everyone. Yes, senior brother Eastern Sky. Everyone's voice was loud and neat. They were proud of it. Changyu. Eastern Sky looked at Changyu. Yes, Changyu said. Let's go back. Eastern Sky turned and flew away. There were too many people and there were not enough gifts. Junior brother, let's go. Changyu's movements were not slow. He turned into a stream of light and flew to Migre's palace. This were the pills. Zhou Wudao stretched out his empty hands. His heart was broken. People want face, trees want bark. Who grew up with you since childhood and even went through life and death with you? Do you know what shame is? Qin Hao cast a glance at Zhou Wudao and immediately slipped away. He couldn't afford to provoke him. Haha, junior sister Xiao Han. Remember to come to Migre's Peak often. The door of Migre's palace will always be open for you. Changyu's laughter came from a void. Xiao Han was stunned. Did she hear it wrong? Since it's the order of Migre's palace, the order is naturally invalid to you. Junior sister, you can go if you want in the future. There's no need to be afraid. Shenhua smiled. This must be Eastern Sky's idea. Bang! At this moment, the broken hearts of countless disciples seemed to ring in the air. Migre's palace, the main peak of the Divine Palace, was the supreme holy land that every disciple of the Divine Palace dreamed of. Chapter 1449. Every disciple of the 6 peaks of the Divine Palace wanted to see the scenery of Migre's main peak. Those who weren't the heir of Migre's palace weren't qualified to enter. Now, Xiao Han could enter the main peak, which was very enviable. Because of Qin Hao, Changyu gave him 2 bottles of Emperor Realm Qi-building pills on their first meeting. This relationship made the disciples of Daozong Peak jealous. After Eastern Sky left with Qin Hao, Daozong Peak ceased to exist. His methods were fierce and domineering. Lord Daozong wasn't dissatisfied at all. He just looked at the 3 figures leaving and muttered regretfully. Qin Hao hasn't reached his limit yet. He must be hiding something. What a pity. Shermu's emperor will suppression seemed fierce, but in fact, he controlled it well. Since Eastern Sky could sense his aura, how could Shermu not sense the 2 Dilly auras from Taiwei Peak? Shermu did it deliberately. Even if Eastern Sky didn't arrive in the end, he wouldn't really hurt Qin Hao's foundation. Master, the path peak needs to be repaired. Shermu is still lying down. All the first and second seats of the peaks are here, Shenhua said. Shenhua reminded him. This time, Shermu had lost a lot of face. Daozong nodded and looked at all the disciples in the void with a serious expression. He pointed at the pitch-black crater below and said, See, this is the importance of foundation. Whether it was the battle between Qin Hao and Yu Hui or Eastern Sky and Shermu, the foundation also played a role in the strength of a great emperor. In order to hone your foundation, use your vitality to condense earth and stone and build a new path peak for me in 2 days. It's a little taller and bigger than the previous one. It's best if it's bigger than Migre's peak. No way. The disciples of Daozong Peak were sad. The people of Migre's palace destroyed the path peak. Why did Master make us do the hard work and blame it on Eastern Sky? Feng Qianli said with righteous indignation. Oh, you have a backbone. Why don't you call Eastern Sky here and let him cultivate the path peak for us? Daozong looked at Feng Qianli. Disciple. I'm scared. If you don't dare to go, then don't make sound. Next, I'll give you a sacred mission. Follow your senior apprentice, Brother Tian K, to mine purple stone ore. The Dao Creation Hall needs purple stone or to condense. Daozong beckoned to Tian Quebec, Junior brother, come with me. The mysterious Heaven Palace just happens to be lacking manpower. You look very suitable for mining. Tian K Dao bowed to Taoist scripture. Uncle Master. Yes, Tian Quebec. Take Qianli away for training. Yes, Uncle Master. Master, you can't. How can I mine 30,000 purple rock ores by myself? Let me go. Senior brother Shenhua, Please help me. Off you go. Tian K's thick arm wrapped around Feng Qianli, and they disappeared into Xintian Peak. Hee hee, you're full of sarcasm. You deserve it. Zhou Wudao sneered. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and give me the earth stones. Daozong suddenly let out a loud roar. His roar sounded like that of a mighty tiger. Yes, master. One figure after another flew through the air. Nearly 1,000 disciples fell into the pitch-black pit. They looked at the enormous pit and wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Then, like a swarm of laboring ants, they began to fill the pit with earth stones. Naturally, the entire divine palace was shaken. The disciples of every peak were talking about it. Qin Hao had just entered the sect, but he defeated Yu Hui, a disciple of Daozong Peak's upper world. He was second-level emperor realm, and he defeated a false emperor with the will of an emperor. How shocking was that? This matter caused great waves among the older disciples of every peak. What was even more shocking was that Eastern Sky had rushed over to avenge Qin Hao. He'd brutally beaten Mu and razed the entire Daozong Peak to the ground. Such violent methods cast a great shadow in the hearts of the new disciples. First, they were afraid of Eastern Sky's cultivation. Secondly, it was a reminder to everyone that the Divine Palace couldn't afford to offend Qin Hao. Otherwise, one day, another peak in the Divine Palace would be destroyed. The 5 peak masters held a special meeting with their disciples, telling them to pay attention to this. It was normal for the disciples to be afraid of Eastern Sky's cultivation, but the peak lords could see a deeper layer of meaning through this matter. According to Eastern Sky's analysis of Mu's condition, he was no weaker than the peak lords of the 7 peaks. Basically, Eastern Sky was the next Divine Palace sovereign. On the 5th day after the storm at Daozong Peak, the light of an emperor tribulation suddenly descended from the sky above the Divine Palace. It was incomparably vast, and it headed straight for Daozong Peak. In an instant, a sharp spear Qi pierced through the void and shattered 81 beams of tribulation light in succession. Daozong Peak celebrated Yu Hui's success in becoming emperor. Of course, this was a story for another day. At this time, Qin Hao had returned to Migres Hall and arrived at the pavilion. Eastern Sky and Zhang Yu followed him inside. Brother, Mu didn't deliberately target you, but I had some conflicts with him in the past. The person he hates is me. You don't have to take this to heart, and don't be dissatisfied with Uncle Master Daozong. Eastern Sky sat down and said, Okay, Qin Hao nodded, but you destroyed the Daozong Hall because of me. I will find an opportunity to apologize to Uncle Master. You don't have to be so serious. The Daozong Hall contains tens of thousands of imperial methods, and the scrolls are all reinforced by matrices. Eldest brother has a sense of propriety and won't destroy those treasures. As for the restoration of the peak, it will only take a moment for an emperor to cast a spell. Sheng Hua can do it alone, Zhang Yu said. Qin Hao nodded. In fact, the destruction of the peak was not a big deal for the great emperor. At most, it would be a loss of face. What really pained him was the loss of the imperial methods. Since Zhang Yu said so, there must be no problem. Now I'm very curious about the story between eldest brother and brother Mu. Why does he hate you so much? It should be said that he is jealous of you, Qin Hao said with a face full of interest. Mu didn't hate Eastern Sky, but his emotions were somewhat complicated. The main emotion was jealousy. This could be felt. Mu and I are playmates. We grew up together, but he is not as good as me in everything. After coming to the Divine Palace, I was accepted as a personal disciple by Master, and he was accepted as a personal disciple by Uncle Master Daozong. In fact, the cultivation of the 7 peak masters is about the same, and there is no obvious, overwhelming advantage. Brother, you should be very clear that it is just that the direction of their cultivation is different. But Mu doesn't think so. He thinks that Migres Palace is the #1 person in the Divine Palace. Of course, this is not wrong. After all, Master is the Lord of the Divine Palace. His status and identity are above that of the other peak masters. What really bothered Mu was that I could cultivate freely in the 7 peaks, but he was trapped in Daozong Peak. Slowly, his unbalanced mentality became more and more serious until a special thing happened. I ran to Daozong Hall and beat him up in public, just like I did for you today. Eastern Sky said. A special thing happened? Qin Hao was even more interested. He asked, what is it? Since it is the same as me, did Master deliberately go to beat up Brother Shermu for another person? At the mention of this, Eastern Sky and Chong Yu's expressions suddenly changed. It was as if their hearts had been pierced by a thorn. Pain and sadness quietly flowed through their eyes. Say no more. In short, after the 7-day preaching period, if you're not in the human emperor realm, you will never be able to leave Migrez Hall again. I don't want to see something like today happen again. If it was someone else who was hurt, it would not be a problem. If you were the one who was hurt, Eastern Sky's mood changed. He didn't finish his sentence and left with a sullen face. Did I say something wrong? Qin Hao was stunned. Eldest senior brother's mood had changed too quickly. He couldn't leave Migrez Hall until he was a great emperor. Was he going to be grounded? Cough, cough. You didn't say anything wrong. Eldest senior brother is just concerned about you. All right, junior brother, you should have learned a lot from your trip to Daozong Peak today. Stay here and cultivate. You can go to another peak tomorrow. Chong Yu's mood had clearly changed as well. After a few words of consolation, he chased after Eastern Sky and left. Cultivate? How am I supposed to cultivate? I'm not allowed to leave Migrez Hall until I'm a great emperor. Senior brother Chong Yu, leave some Emperor Realm Chi Builder pills for me. Qin Hao hurriedly ran to the door, but there was no sign of Eastern Sky or Chong Yu. He was currently 2nd level Emperor Realm. There was still a considerable distance to go before he could reach the Great Emperor Realm. At least give him 10 or 20 more bottles of pills. Senior brother, junior brother didn't do it on purpose. On the main peak of Migrez Peak, 2 figures stood against the wind, facing the rolling sea of clouds. There was a knot in their hearts that couldn't be untied. I know, Eastern Sky said. It had been so long since they'd last seen each other. It was said that time could smooth out all emotions, but he still couldn't forget. You can't blame Shermu for what happened to Junior sister back then. He wouldn't have expected her to undergo the imperial tribulation. Chong Yu said, Chong Yu, your cultivation is still lacking. You'll lose if you fight Shenghua. Eastern Sky said, I'll go cultivate. Senior brother, you should be alone. Sigh. Chong Yu sighed and disappeared from the cliff in a flash. What had happened back then was similar to what Shermu had done to Qin Hao today. That was why eldest senior brother was so angry. Muri, how great would it be if you were still alive? They all say that I'm the top cultivator in the Divine Palace, but no one remembers that there was once a girl in the Divine Palace who was just as talented as I am. Now, Master has taken in another disciple. Junior brother Qin Hao is as talented as we are. He's a peerless genius. He took 3 bottles of Emperor Realm Chi pills today, but his aura didn't show any signs of disorder. He's even stronger than you and I were back then. Eastern Sky stood alone with a heart-wrenching smile. It was as if he saw a girl in the sea of clouds in front of him. Nightfall. Qin Hao's heart couldn't calm down for a long time. He didn't mind the conflict between him and Shermu, but the strange expression on his senior sister's face when their eyes met. It was as if she didn't know that someone had discovered her. Moreover, no one on Daozong Peak had noticed her. Martial Uncle Daozong's cultivation is so powerful. Even the 6 Emperor Realm elders on the peak, including Shenghua and Shermu, didn't notice her. Am I the only one who can see her? Qin Hao carefully recalled everything. The first time they met, he went to Xintian Peak and happened to meet a woman in the same palace robes. That woman ignored his existence and burst out with an extremely tyrannical dilly that streaked across the sky. The second time was the same, and it was in the sky above Migrez Peak. At that time, even his master didn't seem to sense his senior sister's aura. It was too bizarre, a bit like a dream, and unrealistic. It was as if she was a ghost, and only Qin Hao could see her in the Divine Palace. Could it have something to do with my eyes? Qin Hao touched his eyes. His physical body was formed from 10,000 spirits and was particularly sensitive to the elemental energy of heaven and earth. When his eyes were destroyed, he reconstructed them a second time and merged with the red lotus fire soul, giving his eyes the power of illusory pupils. They could enter the enemy's mind and create illusions. Moreover, they could see through any disguises and array formations in the world. Qin Hao's eyes were different from other martial artists. But that dilly is real. If senior sister is a ghost, no, it should be called a remnant consciousness. She definitely can't burst out with such a tyrannical dilly. Qin Hao's analysis was very accurate. Senior sister's Emperor Realm aura was at the level of Emperor Yuan. It was no different from a living person. It was impossible for her to be a remnant consciousness. But why couldn't others feel her aura? There are 5 pavilions on Migres Peak. Apart from the place where Master is resting, there are 4 more. Is the last one next to me really Senior Sister's residence? Qin Hao suddenly got up. He felt that it was necessary to check it out. It just so happened that it was quiet at night. His 2 senior brothers and Master were cultivating in seclusion. Chapter 1450. In the next moment, Qin Hao disappeared from the room. The cause of Empress Xiantian's death had not been solved, and there was another, non-existent senior sister in Migres Hall. And in the entire Celestial Palace, only Qin Hao could see her. If this trip confirmed his guess, he would associate it with the conversation with Eastern Sky senior brother. Then, was the reason why Eastern Sky and Shermu broke up that year related to senior sister? Qin Hao is not a meddlesome person. No matter what happened in the past, it had nothing to do with him. The reason why he decided to go was firstly because of curiosity. Secondly, if senior sister could really block anyone's sight, then it would be extremely helpful for unearthing the secrets of Xiantian Hall. With senior sister's ability, Qin Hao could easily know everything about Xiantian Hall, including the secrets of Lord Xiantian himself. Senior sister would be a powerful helper. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the sky was shrouded in thick haze. The weather was not good tonight. Stepping out of the pavilion, Migres Peak was pitch black. The night was eerily silent. But this environment did not hinder Qin Hao. Weak soul power gathered in his eyes, and the red lotus fire pupil flickered rhythmically. He gradually approached the 4th pavilion. Qin Hao walked very cautiously. His footsteps were light and almost inaudible. In his previous life, he used the Emperor technique to hide his aura. He did not use vitality, nor did he dare to fly. He could not even jump widely. Although there were only 4 people on Migres Peak, Master Migres, Senior Brother Eastern Sky, and Senior Brother Changyu, which one of them was not an extremely powerful existence in the Emperor Realm. Qin Hao used a trace of soul power. He was already nervous for fear of alarming them. He approached bit by bit. On the surface, each pavilion was not very far from each other. But these few hundred meters made Qin Hao walk for almost an hour. Gently pushing open the courtyard door and squeezing open a narrow gap that was just enough to pass through, Qin Hao turned his body and quickly flashed in. Senior sister's courtyard was very quiet, but unlike other courtyards, there was no trace of life here, and it had a ghostly feeling. However, inside the pavilion, it was unexpectedly brightly lit, as if someone lived there. "We're here." Qin Hao let out a sigh of relief. It was really tiring to walk. Fortunately, Dinda's night traveling technique was not bad. The 3 extreme Great Emperor Realm powerhouses of Migres Peak were also deceived by him. At this moment, he was naturally pleased with himself. Looking at the brightly lit loft, in terms of appearance, it was no different from the one Qin Hao lived in. However, there had once been a mistress here. "I need to talk to senior sister." Qin Hao nodded and walked up the stone steps. He hoped that senior sister was here. In any case, even if she continued to live here, no one at Migres Peak would notice her existence. Stepping on the stone steps, before Qin Hao could approach the door, a handsome figure suddenly descended from the sky and blocked Qin Hao's path. Qin Hao stopped in his tracks and stared at the person in front of him in a daze. "Didn't I tell you to stay in your room and cultivate properly? Why'd you run around? Why didn't you listen?" Eastern Sky's face was gloomy, and his voice was cold. He slowly raised his hand, and in an instant, A ball of violent platinum aura condensed and flung it forward. Eldest senior brother, listen to my explanation. Swish! A dazzling platinum aura flew before his eyes and bypassed Qin Hao, turning into a waterfall that circled around the entire courtyard like a dragon. Palace lanterns lit up one after another, causing this cold and silent courtyard to have a trace of warmth. Who? Qin Hao exhaled and relaxed his nerves. He was indeed frightened. Today, I ate 3 bottles of Emperor Realm Qi building pills in a row at Daozong Peak. What's wrong with my body now? Eastern Sky slowly walked down the stone steps and arrived beside Qin Hao, eldest senior brother. Qin Hao didn't dare to look him in the eye. Yes, although he had only been in the sect for 2 days, this person before him was his eldest senior brother. For his sake, he beat up Shermu and flattened Daozong Peak. At that moment, Qin Hao had an absurd thought, thinking that his eldest senior brother was going to attack him. The outside world was unpredictable. It seemed that he had been too sensitive. After a slight struggle, Qin Hao looked up and asked honestly, "Eldest senior brother, do I have a senior sister?" Eastern Sky's heart ached slightly. He squeezed out a smile and shook his head. "I can't hide it from you. That's right, you have a senior sister. This courtyard is where Muri cultivates." Muri, Qin Hao repeated silently. So, his senior sister's name was Muri. What nice name. Come in. You're not sleeping or cultivating in the middle of the night. It seems that you were taught a lesson by Shermu during the day. Eastern Sky turned around and walked up the stone steps. He pushed open the door that had been closed for a long time. Qin Hao rubbed his nose and followed him in. In the attic, the utensils and furnishings were simple. Most of them were similar to Qin Hao's residence. However, the stuffed animals on the bookshelves and the pink curtains and Charmin were enough to tell that it was a young girl's private room. Sit. Eastern Sky pointed to a chair. Qin Hao nodded and sat down obediently. He knew that his eldest senior brother would tell him everything about Muri. Your senior sister is very beautiful and cute, just like junior sister Xiaohan. At first glance, she's very likable. She used to be Master's favorite disciple. Eastern Sky spoke slowly. He walked to the bookshelf and picked up a rag to wipe it gently. He didn't allow a speck of dust to stain it, just like how Muri used to tidy it. Even the order was the same. I was wondering why you asked senior brother Chanyu to give Honor a gift. So that's why. Qin Hao laughed mischievously. Looking at Dong Tian's meticulous movements and the gentle expression on his face, it made one feel very depressed and uncomfortable. There was a kind of sadness in his heart. Muri is very intelligent and learns everything quickly. She's also very talented. Didn't you make the golden bell soar and the 10 statues merge into one? In fact, your senior sister Miao had already set a record for what you did back then. Eastern Sky smiled and picked up a stuffed rabbit from the bookshelf. He pinched the rabbit's face. So strong. Qin Hao's heart trembled. Although he didn't know what senior sister's results were in other arenas, the golden bell soar and the 10 statues merge into one were already very impressive. After all, Qin Hao had the art of endless samsara, and his primary spirit was top-notch. But Miaoli actually accomplished it too. It was sufficient to see how formidable her talent was. Your senior sister comes from a powerful background. She was the only successor of an ancient clan in the East Continent and had high hopes for her. After entering the Divine Palace, we cultivated together with Chanyu. We learned from each other in private and encouraged each other. Those days of cultivation and growth were the happiest times of my time in the Divine Palace. Later, I became the Emperor first, and Chanyu followed closely behind. Only Muri was stuck at the false Emperor realm and couldn't take that step. You should also know that the strength of one's talent has nothing to do with when one becomes the Emperor realm. It's not that Muri didn't work hard, but that she needed a kind of mental state to sublimate and break her own obstacles in the Emperor realm. Well, senior brother Yuhui was like that. Qin Hao nodded. When one stepped into the Emperor realm was not determined by human strength. It had nothing to do with talent. The Emperor realm was an extremely mysterious realm. But Muri was very distressed because of this. She always felt that she didn't work hard enough. When she saw Chang Yu and I become the Emperor realm one after another, she was very envious, but because of this, she became depressed. Eastern Sky sighed. Chang Yu and I counseled her many times, but she didn't listen at all. Later, we decided to go to Tai Wei Peak and steal the five-colored Emperor Net Immortal that Martial Uncle Tai Wei had carefully raised. Five-colored Emperor Net Immortal. Qin Hao was shocked. It turned out that the two senior brothers had left that peerless immortal herb for their senior sister. Martial artists follow the trend of the heavens for the sake of cultivation, going against the trend of the heavens for the sake of cultivation. The appearance of elixirs and medicinal herbs is going against the heavens for martial artists. However, they do greatly increase the speed of cultivation. In fact, according to Miori's situation, she will become the Emperor realm sooner or later. But in order to make her happy, Chang Yu and I decided to go against the heavens and forcefully push her into the Emperor realm with external forces. Eastern Sky's hands trembled slightly. His expression became very painful, and his voice became hoarse. But if I had to do it all over again, I would rather not go to Tai Wei Peak to steal the five-colored Emperor Net Immortal that day. Elixirs and high-grade medicinal herbs absorb the essence of heaven and earth. The older they were, the more potent their medicinal power. If a false emperor's state of mind was not strong enough, it could indeed go against the heavens and forcefully break through the realm through medicinal power. Qin Hao, as Dindi, was very clear about this point. When he heard this, Qin Hao also knew that this day was the real key. On this day, an extremely important matter must have happened. The five-colored Emperor Net Immortal is incomparably precious. Even the Divine Palace only left one. Because there is no female flower, it is the only one left in the world and was carefully protected by Martial Uncle Tai Wei like his own daughter. Chang Yu and I were very scared. Just after we left, Shermu disobeyed the palace's order and ran from Daozong Peak to Migrez Peak to challenge us. At that time, he had already become an Emperor Realm Master. At that time, Master was discussing the ancestral worship ceremony with the Six Peak Masters. In the entire Migrez Hall, only your senior sister was left. Originally, according to Miori's ability, even if she had not stepped into the true Emperor realm, with the demeanor of a false emperor, Shermu could not do anything to her. But at that time, your senior sister's condition was not good, and she could not enter the Emperor realm. Because of this, Shermu laughed at her wantonly and confused her mind. Unfortunately, she was hit in a fatal place during the fight. For a time, her emperor's spirit collapsed. Heaven made a fool of her. In the midst of life and death, she accidentally broke through the barrier of the Emperor realm, leading to the arrival of the Emperor Tribulation. Eastern Sky closed his eyes and recalled the extremely painful day. He did not even see Miori for the last time. The Emperor Tribulation is a terrifying force. It is the gate of hell that prevents warriors from becoming emperors. It is a ruthless butcher's knife. You may not understand it now, but when you really reach that step, you will understand how terrifying it is. Not to mention that Miori was not injured. Even at her peak, many peerless geniuses fell in the Emperor Tribulation. When the light of the Tribulation fell, your senior sister's soul was no more. Eastern Sky regretted it. The Tranquil Heart Sutra could slay one's inner demons, refine one's Tao heart, purify one's soul, and resist the invasion of thousands of sounds. It was the fatal nemesis of thousands of musical cultivators in the world. Shantian Peak and Qin Hao learned from Tian, Quebec. Other than improving their craftsmanship, their strength also increased. In the past, they would need to temper themselves thousands of times before they could smash all the purple rock essence ores. Now, they could do it in 20 strikes. In the Tao Repository Palace, Qin Hao cultivated spells. His vitality became stronger and stronger, and his usage of soul power became more and more exquisite. Many old disciples felt inferior when it came to casting spells. However, No one dared to stand out and challenge him. And every time they went, Mu wasn't there. In the Tai Wei Peak, true Lord Tai Wei taught Qin Hao alchemy. Rather than preaching, it was better to say that they were learning from each other. After all, Qin Hao's alchemy skills were broad and profound. Once he opened his mouth, it was clear and logical. He had many wonderful ideas. Even true Lord Tai Wei nodded in amazement. He regretted not having met Qin Hao earlier. He almost wanted to burn incense and become sworn brothers with Qin Hao. However, Qin Hao wouldn't say anything about the five-colored emperor net immortal grass. In these 2 years, Qin Hao's life was very fulfilling. The first time he went to the Tao Repository Spirit Waterfall, the first time he entered the mysterious Heaven Furnace Cave to Mine, the first time the upper echelons of the 7 peaks gathered to worship the ancestors and celebrate the new year, and the first time he accidentally fell into the Tao Abyss, which alarmed the 7 peak masters. 2 years in the Divine Palace had made Qin Hao's cultivation soar by leaps and bounds. Not only him, but Xiao Han, Shou Wuk, Zhou Wu Dao, Yishui Han, and many other strength had undergone great changes. The Divine Palace had brought them too much joy. There was warmth here that the outside world did not have. There was no killing, no scheming, only support and encouragement. If possible, he was willing to stay here for the rest of his life and slowly cultivate with his senior brothers to explore the secrets of the supreme God level. Cloud Change Peak. Main Formation Tao. On this giant peak, there were formations hidden everywhere, from big houses to small plants and even dust. It could be said that every step was dangerous. At this moment, 2 figures were sitting in the majestic Cloud Change Pavilion. Qin Hao held a white chess piece and placed it down, surrounding the black chess pieces. The black chess pieces disappeared one after another. Opposite him, the sage-like perfected cultivator Yun Yi smiled and placed the black chess piece in his hand, unexpectedly surrounding the white chess piece in the opposite direction. He could visit any peak lord, even if he wasn't in the middle of a lecture period. This was a unique privilege that disciples of the other 6 peaks didn't have. Although Qin Hao hadn't learned any musical arts from Yao Guang Immortal Lord, he'd gained a better understanding of music after listening to his senior uncle's zither playing. He was no longer as ignorant as he'd been in the past. If he were to leave the Divine Palace and return to the outside world, Qin Hao could easily discern the artistic conception conveyed by a zither master's performance. From there, he'd be immersed in it, find its weaknesses, and crack it. Because of this, Qin Hao quickly discovered the difference in the music as Ning Tianxing played. The music sounded soothing, but the rhythm and frequency weren't consistent. The combination of accents and weak notes became more and more complex. If one were to indulge in it, one's mind would quickly be thrown into chaos. It would be like falling into a maze and losing one's sense of self and direction. Channeling the array into music, he's mixing the power of arrays into the music. Qin Hao suddenly opened his eyes and was shocked. Yes, perfected Lord Yun Yi nodded without hesitation. There are many types of arrays, and their effects are complex. There are elemental arrays, illusion arrays, auxiliary arrays, and so on. But no matter what array it is, in the eyes of the secular world, it requires the gathering of spiritual materials to trigger the power of the Tao. To put it bluntly, it requires the attachment of spiritual materials or spirit qi to other objects. For example, condensing earth and stones into an array, using fire as an array, gathering water as an array. Those with powerful array skills can use a blade of grass or a tree as an array. However, only the mighty figures at the level of Array Emperor know the most powerful use of arrays. They can also fuse the Tao of all things. Perfected Lord Yun, he looked at Qin Hao seriously. In his eyes, arrays weren't just a defensive technique, but also a weapon to kill enemies. A 9-star Great Emperor's understanding of arrays was beyond the imagination of outsiders. The Tao of all things. Qin Hao thought carefully. That's right. Tianxing has fused arrays into his music to increase the power of his music. When activated with soul power, The power is beyond your imagination. Of course, you can also fuse the array formation into your battle skills, origin chi, and even your origin soul. It can greatly increase the strength of your attacks and produce a miraculous effect. Xinhao, think about it. If you were to secretly merge the flame, slaughter, heavenly destruction formation that I taught you with your soul power, what kind of scene would that be? Perfected Lord Yun, he looked at Xinhao's eyes. Xinhao's soul fire was the strongest alien fire in the world. The power of the Red Lotus Overlord fire was terrifying to begin with.